Welcome to the Sharpest College Football Podcast. This is our Mountain West Conference preview. This is BuckMetrics. With me, as always, is Robert Martin. I am in Newport Beach, California, where healthcare is very expensive. Robert, you are in Canada, where healthcare is very affordable. However, as imperfect and expensive and odd as the healthcare system here in the United States is, one feature that you will find is that we have amazing specialists. You will find people from all over the globe. They have very difficult conditions to solve and fix, and they will fly from all over the world to go to the Mayo Clinic to see specialists that can solve their problems. And today we have returning our own version of the Mayo Clinic. We have brought in Step on a Duck at Step on a Duck 1 from Twitter. He is our own Mayo Clinic because we have a very tricky condition here known as what the hell is the Mountain West Conference after a certain team on top. So he helped us untangle the MAC, and he's going to do so with the Mountain West. Duck, thank you for joining us. I want to reintroduce yourself to...
Yeah, Step on a Duck from the major gambling forums and Twitter, and been on the podcast circuit this summer. And so thrilled to be back with you and untangle this crazy Mountain West Conference, a conference that's been built on consistency and reliability with the teams in the conference. And this year is going to be anything but that.
That's very well said. And before we move on, I might as well let my co-host get a word in. Robert, hello.
Hi, no, this is it. This is the last conference preview we're doing. Of course, a really fun one, but that's it. After this, and it's week 1. Now, just a quick kind of administrative note, we will not be previewing week 0, mostly because I don't have a lot to say about those two actual games. Or it depends if you're one of the week 0 is this week and next week, or it's not. I don't know. Whatever. This week is week 0, next week is week 1, whatever. I don't care, but fine. Yes, we're not going to preview Florida State, Georgia Tech, and SMU, Nevada. But we'll be here next week, and we will talk about all of the important week 1 games next week, but just not those two games. But yeah, it's actually so exciting. Okay, yes, we're not previewing those games, but I am definitely sitting down on Saturday at, I think it's noon Eastern. I'm fairly sure it's noon Eastern, but it's in Ireland, so whatever. But I'm going to be sitting down on Saturday, and I'll be watching college football, and that makes me happy.
I'm hosting a barbecue that starts at about 5:30 Pacific time with a bunch of non-college football fans. So I'm very prepared to get a bunch of just comments about what the hell are you watching here, dude? Even they will know Nevada SMU is a mismatch here. But you know what? I don't think they know what a first half side is either. With all love and respect to my friends, sorry. Get used to it. All right, let's start with the Mountain West Conference. First of all, revisiting our predictions last year. I had the upset, and boy, it still looks a little hard to figure out. I picked Colorado State over Boise. Robert, not a bad process there. I can see your logic in Hawaii over Stanford didn't quite work out. Yeah, once again, I got duped by Air Force, taking them. Not a bad pick with Fresno State in the title game. I think I talked to you, as is often the case in some of these G5 conferences, into Colorado State. I didn't even stick with that pick. You picked them to make the conference title game. They did not, but you're in Boise State, in whom I did not believe. So I think you and I will call this a draw. We got a little room for improvement here. As always, here is our glossary. Take a screen grab of this, copy and paste into your Sharpest College Football Podcast workbook. Refer to it through the rest of this podcast and throughout the season as you listen to us. If you were listening to our second podcast of this season, the Futures Podcast, you might recall that this conference, I just gave it the old, I'm not going to bet on the conference champ here. It doesn't make sense. I'm just going to, if this is a race, I'd just light up a cigar right now and just watch and not bet, because I'm still not sure exactly how I feel about this conference beyond the logical contender at the top. Again, that's why Duck is here, to help us make some sense of this, the jammiest of traffic jams, if you will. Here's the overview. Excuse me. 7 new head coaches from last season, plus Spencer Danielson at Boise. He was the interim that was made permanent. So that is a lot amount of turnover. No real proven quarterback in the conference, as far as I'm concerned. A muddled conference. This was really challenging because there's such a big traffic jam basically below Boise that it was hard to sorting out, okay, who should be favored in just in games between the third, fourth, and maybe seventh or eighth place teams. Made even tougher by every team. I don't know if you guys caught this, plays either Washington State or Oregon State, which makes this nuts. And I don't know if you saw this. This is really crazy, unprecedented. We have a 12-team conference. Did you guys catch it that each team only has 7 conference games?
Yeah, part of the scheduling agreement between the Pac-2, the remaining castoffs from the Pac-12, Washington State and Oregon State, and the Mountain West. Wazoo and Oregon State are not official Mountain West
Mm-hmm.
members, but they have a scheduling agreement. So every Mountain West team will play Oregon State or Washington State, or in some cases both.
Yep.
And in exchange for that, the Mountain West truncated their conference schedule down from 8 to 7 conference games this year. So everyone will have at least 5 non-conference opponents.
Yes. And what do we have, and not necessarily in this conference, but most conferences, you've got a lot of this going into the last week of the season. Oh, tee hee ha. Look at this. There's 3 teams tied for first. If the season ended today, make your own joke. Team C is out because they have the low, because they lost to the last place team or just some insipid tiebreaker. I get the logic. The execution was really poor. They should have cut down a non conference game. This is not going to go well. I really think the Mountain West just broke rule 1 and the only rule of the podcast, which is do not dumb here. They dumbed here. They have made a mess. I am fully expecting when we're going into basically the last week of the season, we're going to be in a situation where we cannot untangle this mess. Do you guys have any idea what this picture is? Did you see the excellent HBO series on Chernobyl? That's
I
what this
think
is
that, yeah,
about.
I figured that's what this was. Yeah, that was Chernobyl. Yeah.
We're looking at Chernobyl, where you basically might have something where you could easily have 3 undefeated teams, and there's no real fair way to untangle it. And this, blame who you want, depending on where you park your car or your yacht or whatever. I blame Larry Scott. He's the worst commissioner I've ever seen in my life in any sport. Some people can blame George K, as we call him. Robert, you're an Oregon guy. You can blame Washington for the whole dissolution of the conference, since they're supposedly the bad guys. Pretty everybody that's not basically going to the Big Ten blames USC and UCLA. But whatever. This is like the last kind of shakeout of just the horribly run conference and just the dissolution of it. And I'm fully expecting just to be in a really dumb spot on that final Saturday of the regular season. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I want to just add, actually, you go to the Chernobyl picture. It's cool. We blamed. I think it's the commissioner of the Mountain West last year because they also had the same scenario last year where there was some sort of chaos, and didn't they wasn't there something like where they randomly flipped a coin or something? Or it was something insane where it was like, oh, now Boise State gets into the conference championship game, and then they won. They're a conference champion. It's what? How is that? We all wasn't that? Yeah.
There's a 3-horse race between Boise State, San Jose State, and UNLV, and Jose got left out.
By the
Yeah.
virtue of some dumb tiebreaker, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we might be the week
So if
before
it's
that.
already
Before we even,
broken, just
yeah,
break it more.
yeah. We might have been like way farther down the list then had we gone a week back further, and we might be to that point where they're drawing straws or throwing numbers out of a hat.
Yeah, flipping the U.S. quarter is not a tiebreaker. With all the different ways that you can break ties today, it should not come down to the U.S. quarter.
Yeah, nobody's ever going to accuse conference commissioners of being overly creative or resourceful when it comes to figuring stuff out. I think that's a fair statement. So, all right, back to the overview. I think with all the new coaches and just the dearth of proven quarterbacks, I think aside from the team at the top, this is going to be just really just a lot of unexpected things in this conference. Duck, you agree?
I do. I think when we'll go through team by team, and we'll find that every team has strengths, every team has holes, every team has questions in some capacity. There's a lot of scheduling nuances that make it really favorable for some teams that you may not think will be ready to make that leap because of the schedule being favorable. You'll have other teams where the schedule is really front loaded with top 5 or 6 Mountain West teams, and it's just going to make for really must see TV.
Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun conference. I don't think this conference is going to get the CF College Football Playoff bid. Apparently, the AP does. I don't know why they think that, but Okay, but yeah, no, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be chaos. This is gonna be like a year where it's like a team that's like a 17-point underdog beats another
Yeah.
team outright by 10. That's the kind of year this is gonna be.
Yeah.
And I'm here for that because again, no one is going to be really checking these lines. They're not going to be like, "Oh, you know what? That's way too many points to give this team that has 3 wins." Like no one is going to be doing that. So that's where we find value and we enjoy. And again, for my this year, I basically changed around, moved some of the channels we get. I'm getting the CBS Sports Network, which apparently has all the Mountain West games on it for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why, but I get that now. So I will watch those, quote unquote, legally. So it's good.
You could say, yeah, you're not doing through that connection in Ulaanbaatar or someplace like
Something
that.
like that, yeah. So yeah, I'll be watching them differently than I have been in the past. Yes.
I remember like when Pac-10 Network or 12 Network first came out, just the sites they had to go through. I think my laptop literally caught an STD from like the portals I had to go through to watch those games. That was just horrible. All right.
It was
Always
brutal. It was
use
in
always
2% of households, I think. It was unreal how that conference just failed to get
Yeah.
into the big cable providers, and it was just so painstaking to try to either get that network legally or through the bootleg method.
Yeah. Just, at
Don't
least
click
make
the
it
links.
easy to get illegally. Come on, guys, do better than that. All right. My first team to preview Boise State Broncos. Actually, so Phil Steele, our guy, was a little wrong on this. We'll get to that in a second. So we have a little more information in terms of the quarterback, but this is the first full season under Spencer Danielson. He was the defensive coordinator last 3 seasons. Last season, the defense was not that great. I don't know. I think people just put it on autopilot. Oh, Boise State, Andy Avalos, good defense. Nah, their defense was not great. And look at this defensive apex, 132. Now they played a tough slate, so it's the average opponent was 105, but giving up 27 points more than that is a problem. Especially because typically they should have a talent advantage over pretty much everybody else in the conference since they're on a different level. I think they have a different media deal than everybody else, just as an acknowledgement of they're just on a different plane than the rest of the conference. The air quotes here. The new offensive coordinator is Dirk Cutter, who I think, and I've been like on this from day one, like just conspiracy Buck here. I think he's been behind the scenes basically since our podcast began, Robert. We've had a couple of instances where this is interesting, and I felt his presence throughout. I honestly think now, I know Boise's very insular. They hire their own. I think they hired Spencer Danielson because as much as anything, he's a Boise guy, but he also basically realized, look, I'll do all the stuff of head coaching that Cutter doesn't want to do. Cutter can basically be the head coach and just he can lay all the bull crap on me. I seriously think this is Dirk Cutter's team, just like it was 2 years ago, and just like it was when last year after Avalos got let go. This is wrong. Malachi Nelson is not the quarterback. He is not replacing Taylor Green, who went to Arkansas. It is now, what's his name? Bussy Breck.
Maddox Madsen.
Okay, yeah. I came almost not really close at all. But he started a few games last year for them. I think once Taylor Green lost, did he lose his job to this guy? Because Green was just better. You would know better than us, Duck. What happened there?
He really started slow the first couple of games of the season. He played terribly against Washington. He
Yeah.
played less than average against UCF in the home loss. They struggled through and overwhelmed North Dakota State, and then they had this really close win against a really putrid San Diego State team.
Yeah.
And after that, they had pulled the plug on the experiment, and they switched gears and they threw Maddox in there. And he led the come from behind win against San Jose State in a game where they spotted Jose 21-0 to start the game and then came back and won. Then he played almost entirely in that Colorado State game, which Boise was up by 20 points with 4 minutes to go. And Colorado State punched one in. They forced a 3-and-out. They had a long punt return. They punched another one in. They recovered an onside kick. They threw the Hail Mary. We all know how it went. And they Boise ended up losing, but they stuck with Madsen for the majority of the season then. And so he was really in this situation the incumbent, but you had Malachi Nelson, who transferred in from USC. He was at one point the number one rated quarterback recruit in the country per Phil Steele. He had a lot of talent coming out of high school, and the book on him was that he was going to be the next big thing.
Yeah.
And it's looking more and more now like maybe he should have just stuck around at USC, because he's not going to see the number one job at least right away at this program. And I'll be interested to see, does he do something hastily and flippantly leaves the program, or decides he's going to take a redshirt year, or who knows what he's going to do. I don't know what his mindset would be, being a previous 5-star number one overall recruit, but he was in a battle and
Yeah.
he didn't win it. So I'm wondering about, and I don't know him, I don't have the inside scoop on his work ethic, but something's not right with the development if he
Yeah.
has not won the job after stepping down in class to the Mountain West.
I think if Riley wanted to keep him, he would have stayed at USC too. I think that was a
Parting of the
mutual
ways.
pardon, if you will. All right, thank you for that. That's helpful. The defense last season, or this season, they have the third highest improvement metric in all of BCS. I think they had probably a good amount of injuries in 23. And that's explaining maybe why they just took a step back. What's interesting too is that after Avalos was fired, I just had their defensive rating 10 points better after the firing than before. This is not. I'll just say this: is if I'm backing Boise, this defensive coordinator is not probably my favorite name I've ever seen. Eric Chenander did some like, how do I say this? He was defensive coordinator under Scott Frost in Nebraska, to put it objectively, and I'll keep it at that. Draw your own conclusions. This schedule is a gift. I don't even know how to identify their third toughest game. I've got some ideas. We'll come back to that. Season win total is 9. I'm pretty sure I'm going over. Now it's up to 9.5 in some places that I'm considering. 9 is such a bad number. That's a DraftKings number. So probably that person was either fired for making such a bad number, or is going to be the next CEO. I'm not a fan of DraftKings. So draw your own conclusion there. Odds on favorite to win conference championship. I'm not a fan of that, although I can definitely understand if you're going to do that. I'll throw it to you, Robert, with this. Looking at this schedule, after Oregon, I go back to my second to last bullet point. What's the third or second toughest game on this schedule?
Yeah, I mean, at Hawaii? Mostly just because of the at part. But even then, it's not that far. You're just Idaho. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
It's the
it's
schedule
not
after
particularly
Oregon.
difficult.
I see him favored, not by a little, in all 11. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, again, yeah, outside of Oregon, and okay, you play both of the Pac-2, which isn't nothing, but they're not really Pac anymore. They're definitely more Mountain West than Pac.
Yeah.
But like, you've got UNLV, that's not nothing. That's probably the next toughest game, but
Yeah.
it's not a difficult schedule. But that being said, though, I'm not the highest on this team. This team wasn't good. They fired Avalos, but they basically backdoored their way into the conference championship game and then just won the conference championship game. So I'm not giving them a ton of props for winning the conference championship game when they probably shouldn't have been there in the first place. They beat Air Force when Air Force decided to stop playing football for some reason.
As they do
So,
once a year.
as they do, yeah, as
No.
they do, and we'll be talking about Air Force. I think they're next, but no, it was not I'm not sitting here being like, man, that team last year definitely convinced me. I have no idea. What are they in the AP poll? Are they actually 12th, or are they like
Are they that high?
they are the highest ranked G5 team, higher than
God.
Liberty. I know, it's insane. What is? Let me. I want to see that number. But they are the. I thought that was insane that they are the highest ranked G5 team. Let's see. What's the rankings here? They are not 12th. No. Okay.
I
They're.
don't see them ranked. Are they maybe in just the other
Oh.
receiving votes? Yeah, they're the third in receiving votes.
Ah. Okay.
Yeah.
But by the rules, they would theoretically
Yep.
be there. But that being said, Liberty is. Did Liberty receive? Please tell me Liberty received votes. Oh
Uh,
God, they didn't. No one voted for them.
no.
What?
Well, you know what that
They're
means?
cli-
Boise now holds a tiebreaker at this moment for any kind of tie to get in the conference title. Yay, Mountain West.
There you go. They're already perpetuating this. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy now. But no, clearly the AP voters are not listening to this podcast ever. So that looks bad on them. But no, again, I don't think this should be the top G5 team. If this is the top G5 team, I'd be very surprised. Like, again, just because they're better than 11 of the teams, maybe 10 of the teams on their schedule, doesn't mean they're going to win all those games. There's going to be mistakes. They're going to mess up. they're going to lose games. Maybe they get to the conference championship game. I don't think they will, but
Wow.
I think they got extremely lucky last year, and I don't think that's happening again.
My goodness. Just hot take run team number one. All right, Joshua. Two things. Number one, who do you think is their second and third toughest game on the schedule? And are you as shocked as I am? I know that you went on Reed's pod and you talked about week 0, week 1. Did not hear that yet, but I found that line too short at Georgia Southern. I think that I've just got a different opinion. So I've thrown two questions at you. You want to start with the latter one? Just do you see them as way more than 11 points better than Georgia Southern? I know it's on the road.
It's a long travel spot. The heat and humidity of the Southeast could affect play in the second half. But one thing that I want to unpack, and there's a lot to unpack with Boise, Boise has an identity that they want to run the football. And forget G5 ranks, Ashton Genty might be the best running back in the country. And he is extremely explosive. He's a game changer with the ball in his hands. They have 4 offensive linemen back that have significant snaps under their belt. And now that the quarterback situation has sorted itself out, and with the fact that the receiver room has experienced most turnover of any position on offense, they're going to run the football. And that's something that Georgia Southern could not stop last year. It's not a Sun Belt preview, but if you go back and look at games that Georgia Southern had played week in and week out, they just could not stop the run. They were gashed all year, allowing big plays in the run game. And I just don't see a path where it's going to go well unless Georgia Southern is able to outscore them and the games at home, and maybe they have a chance to keep it close. We've seen Georgia Southern offenses under Clay Helton do that in the past, where they've pulled out some shocking performances. But I just don't see how Georgia Southern is going to be able to stop the run. And it's one of those things where what's coming and you just cannot stop it. So I do not think Georgia Southern is going to have a tremendous chance to necessarily win that game because they're not going to be able to get stops.
Yeah.
And so based on the line in total, you've got a Vegas implied 34.5 to 22.5. So I would look to play, if you can find a Boise State team total over 34.5 or 35 flat, I would play that when the derivatives come out. But unpacking the rest of Boise relative to the Mountain West comrades that they have, their defense was not world beaters. Like they returned 11 people on defense, and it was a defense that was really just mediocre. Right? They were 71st in opponent EPA per play. They allowed 26 points per game, which was the second most in the last 7 years at Boise State. There's a reason that they're experiencing coach and coordinator changes, and it really does come down to how they played on the defensive side of the football. So I'm not sure, we've alluded to, that Boise is just going to cakewalk through their schedule. Now, when we factor in their really tough games after Oregon, at UNLV could be tough.
Mm-hmm.
At Hawaii is a game that they typically will struggle in against the number. I'm not saying they're going to lose against Hawaii. Where I do think that they could struggle, and this could be an answer to one of my hot 3 questions we'll discuss at the end, they end their conference slate on November 23rd at Wyoming.
Yep. I have that as their third toughest game. Yeah.
And when you talk about teams that can stop the run,
Yeah.
Wyoming is a team that is just rock solid, and they stick their nose in there in the front 7. And I think that that's a team that'll give Boise some trouble. In fact, when you look at the last 9 meetings, Boise's only covered 3 of them ATS. And so Wyoming is a team that's given Boise State some trouble. And that's the second of back-to-back road games to end the conference slate for Boise. And that may not be as easy a game as people might think. So that when we're talking tough games, I have that Wyoming game circled as a spot to certainly back the Pokes, and I currently have that one power rated at Wyoming +9.
I've considered the game in Oregon to be a foregone conclusion that they're going to lose. Maybe they can, maybe like a 12%, I don't know, probability of winning, but I agree with so much of what you said, and yet 2 things. I just by my numbers, it's more likely that they actually beat Oregon than they lose both at UNLV and Wyoming. That's why I like the over. I totally agree with you on the sprints of the coaching changes. The one thing that I keep coming back to is I think Curtis Cutter is really the head coach. I really do, and I'm comfortable with that. I was not comfortable going against this team, which I wanted to before I ran all the numbers, and I'm a lot more comfortable backing it since they have a good head coach who's not really the head coach. Yeah, it's weird. Danielson, like we said, the defense was not that great last year. Promoting him didn't make sense either. But I don't know. I have them as the leader here, and I it's hard to make a case for anybody else just to say, yeah, over the stretch of the season, catching them. But Robert feels differently than me on that one, so I can't wait to see where he lands on this. He landed on and got duped by the Air Force Falcons. Hey, there's a
And
lot
one
of
last thing
skill.
I'll say real quick about
Oh,
Boise, if I could,
please, yes.
if if you're looking at the markets and you're looking at what you want to do for Boise from a futures perspective involving the conference, those conference odds are not high enough for me to want to take a
Yeah.
position out on Boise. If you like Boise to run the table and have rack up the wins, they're about plus 480 to make the playoff.
Mm,
So I think what it could come down to is this, and I'll just revert back to last year's Group of Five Representative Liberty. Everybody was sitting around the dinner table on New Year's Day and they watched the bowl game and they got blitzed against Oregon, and it was really sad. Oregon threw in the towel early when that game was, it was like 4 or 5 touchdowns, pow, and then it was just the onslaught continued, and it was what 54-6 was the final.
mm,
I think Boise could, they might be playing the final score game a little bit against Oregon. They may not win the game. I have this,
yeah.
probably won't win the game. I have it power rated about 25, but you can't tell me that if Boise State goes in there and they lose by 17, that's a win for Boise, and
Yep.
that's going to hold weight with the committee, because I firmly believe that performance will be put up against anything Liberty does with their paperweight schedule. And I think that a competitive showing by Boise State at Oregon will hold a lot of weight. So
That's a good
there
point. Yeah.
could be a lot of value in a plus 480 to make the playoff if you already like Boise to run through the league.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that, but that's why you're here.
Let's go Air Force.
All right. Air Force. A lot of zeros here on offense. No returning starts at quarterback. No returning starts on the offensive line. This I just starting over basically at basically everything on offense. The defense is almost as bereft in terms of returning starts and career starts. We're talking about basically bottom 12 in both of those. I don't have a lot here. Season win total is 6.5. Just the fact that Phil Steele has this as his second place Mountain West team, get the case with so many questions everywhere else. You've got continuity here and you've got a definite identity, but Jesus, that makes a team with no returning people that have taken meaningful snaps, your second place team. I don't even. I mean, I'm just. It's such a blank canvas. I don't know what to paint here. That's why this was to me another team that's usually it would be a logical one to look at. Phil's got him as his second place team. That's why this was just a cigar break for me in terms of this conference. Where did you land on the Falcons, Doc?
So the Falcons are experiencing a lot of turnover, but they do have very consistent attributes to look at. So their coordinators and their head coach, Troy Calhoun, they've been there forever, the longest tenured in FBS, in fact, or very close to it. And they have their system, right? They're a service academy. And so these players are just wired differently
Mm-hmm.
as military personnel than what you would have from just traditional players. There's a lot less distraction. There's a lot more regimen. And so I think the system is set up to handle this. One thing that I took a look at, and I didn't make it a sizable play, but I actually bet Air Force to win the conference at plus 1,500. And the
Wow.
reason I did that is they host Fresno, they
Yep.
host Colorado
Yep.
State, they have no Boise on the schedule, they have no UNLV on the schedule. And I think that the Mountain West slate, when you look at, they host San Jose, they're at Wyoming, at New Mexico, host Colorado State, host Fresno, and then at Nevada, at San Diego State. It's not really you're not really grasping at straws to think that they can post a big conference win number.
Yep.
And um, I just don't see a lot of the games that are unwinnable. And so Air Force could be middle of the road. They could really take a substantial step back on offense. Or they could reload for their perspective, right? And they could get the fullback dive rolling and they can get the triple option rolling. And then maybe 2 or 3 times a game, they're throwing the ball to wide open receivers because the defense loses track of them. And that's their bread and butter. And they run the triple option very well. They're really the only service academy who hasn't gone away from their true triple option flex bone principle roots. And I feel as though the conference schedule that they were dealt really aligns for them to at least have a chance to control their own destiny instead of hoping that teams make mistakes or maybe an outclassed team exhales and doesn't show up. I just don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for them to go 6-1 in league play, at which point they'll probably get in and they won't be plus 1,500 on the money line come conference championship week. So if I wanted to get out of it at that time, I could for a profit.
I can't disagree with anything you said, although if it comes down to the stupid committee rankings, they're so far out. They will never get a single mention in that room. I can promise you that. And I guess I will love to bet on this. I will be suckered into this team next year. They sucker me in every year. I'm out. But man, they've just had a tendency just to have some I can't even say bad, just like stupid stretches of football where you can't believe they lost to these teams that they're clearly better than.
It was shocking last year when they were 8-0 and rolling and nationally ranked.
Yes.
And the carpet just got pulled out from underneath them. They played West Point and they were 3 touchdown favorites and they got blown out. And then they go to Hawaii in a team that they seemed to clearly be better than, and they could not move the football. It was really shocking. And then they regrouped. They had some close losses in tough competition, UNLV and Boise State, before they really rallied the troops and won the bowl game to salvage the season. But that 4-game stretch was shocking. The hard and fast fall from a service academy team, and it really was the result of quarterback play. When their quarterback went out with injury, they just did not have a serviceable backup who could run the triple and make the right reads, and their explosiveness on offense was completely gone.
Yeah. Robert, are you going to be suckered in by Air Force again, just like I've been the last 2 seasons?
I probably will be at some point.
There we go.
But right now, no. Right now, it is just a firm no. This is not going to go well. Look, some teams, if you get completely cleaned out on O-line, that's okay because you have an athletic quarterback that can run. Oh, wait. This is Air Force, the team that relies completely on running the ball, and they're replacing their entire offensive line. Okay. Sounds like a plan, right? This could go so badly. This could go so epically badly, right? And again, they can't hit the transfer portal because the whole military service thing. There are a lot of issues here. And again, their defense mostly holds, except they're a bit low on some of the pass defense, but okay. But outside of that, like the offensive line is scary for a team that completely relies on offensive line, and also having to replace a quarterback. Again, that's not necessarily the biggest thing for Air Force, but they are especially that's a specialty package there. Someone who can run in the triple option, and block in the triple option, right? You can't just pick up a kid from a high school in the middle of nowhere who can throw the ball 30 or 40 yards down the field and be like, you're a quarterback, you're our quarterback now. You can't do that, right? So this could be really challenging, right? And I think this gets back to last season, right? And I remember last season we had our Buck the Bookie segment, and I was heavy on Air Force on that, and they massively let me down. Yeah. And there's probably a bit of salt for me from that because I had insane value on that bet, and then it just let me down. But the thing is, though, it's like when you're looking at a team that is so Jekyll and Hyde, it's arguably one of the best teams in the country, definitely a top 25 team. I think they were ranked at some point in there in that stretch, early, like mid to late stretch. They were a top 25 team, one of the best G5 teams in the country. And you can go from that to losing straight up to Hawaii as 3 touchdown favorites, losing to some of the worst teams in the country, which you should not have lost to, like Army. I don't even think Army. I'm not sure Army even made a bowl last year. I don't think they did actually, because you can go from that high to that low. That is really concerning to me, and it makes me question. Okay, did you just get really lucky in those other games? Were the other teams just so completely unprepared to play against a triple option that you got easy wins? It makes me question where this team actually was. I don't think you can look at the first what was it, 8 games. Yeah, you can't look at the first 8 games of last year and be like, okay, that was the team. The back 4 games, that was the aberration. It's no, okay, clearly it was the same team. Okay, yeah, the quarterback was gone. Okay, that's fine. But again, like, this is a running team, right? Like, okay, yes, the triple option changes a bit, but fundamentally, this is a ground pound, right? You could ground pound against any team. It doesn't need an. And again, we're not talking. They weren't 8-0 until they played Oregon or somebody. They played Army. This is not. It's not like they were suddenly playing a college football playoff team and then that's why they lost. They were still massive favorites in that game. There's a lot of concern here, and I can't really get behind a team that just seemed to absolutely blow it that much that fast. That's a huge red flag for me. And you couple that with the complete having to replace an offensive line, which is absolutely completely pivotal to anything this team does offensively, that makes me out on this team.
I can't disagree with you. And what's going to happen is they're going to have, I don't know,
You're gonna start like 5-0.
they're going to have a great game where they just absolutely dominate someone. They play flawless 4 quarters, and you and I are both going to be back. We're going to be back.
Yep.
We're going to be helpless. I don't know if it's Troy Calhoun and his odd hairstyle or what it is, but just we can only resist them for so long. Got a spell on us. All right.
Couple wagering nuggets on Air Force if you want to file these away for later on in the season. Air Force is 5-0 in their last 5 non-conference games as a greater than 7-point underdog. That'll apply at Baylor. And so when they're catching points, could be worth taking a peek at them. They played that bowl game in 2022 and blasted Baylor, so maybe a Baylor revenge spot, but depending on the number, they could be catching enough points to make that one worthwhile. They're also 1-4 ATS their last 5 years after playing Navy. And obviously, when the service academies play against each other, you can throw out the record books, but then regrouping from the pomp and circumstance, getting off of the service academy game, they struggle the week after Navy. So it could be interesting to figure where they might be this year. They're at New Mexico. And I would guess we'll get into this later on in the preview. They'll probably be laying a big number. Probably not a spot to lay it with Air Force after Navy.
That's really interesting. And yeah, let's come back to that when we get to Mexico. Much, much, much later. They're not towards the top of this conference, but that's an interesting point to revisit in a bit here. All right, Fresno State, the Bulldogs. Tim Skipper, the interim coach. Jeff Tedford had to retire again. Great career again, coach. Congratulations on just a tremendous career at Cal and Fresno again. Much respect to you. I just don't like this team. I've seen a lot of people making cases for them, which I get, but I think I've got maybe a little stronger argument against them. The odds, I have a hard time, and maybe some of this was Tedford was just not himself last year. I don't know. The offensive coordinator is Pat McCann. This is his second season. He had no OC experience prior to coming here. Mikey Keene dropped down from the American to this conference. He went from a 70 apex just to an 82 in a conference that is much easier defensively. That's in career starts 12 to 22. Not saying he's a totally finished product. Your second season as a starter, I want to see better than 82 apex in the Mountain West. Not really impressed there. I'm very concerned about the offensive line too. They are returning a lot of experience from last year's team. They have a low improvement metric. One of the reasons I have the improvement metric, it's typically when people say, oh, we return a lot from a bad team. And I always want to answer the question, well, were they bad because they were inexperienced or were they bad because they're just bad? And I think this offensive line was just bad because they're bad. They had already basically had a lot of experience before last season. They're very experienced. Even though being experienced last year, they were horrible as a running team, a GGAB of 464. So they were well below. They're more than a standard deviation below the average in terms of running game. Don't like it. I just not playing the season wins. Definitely not playing them for champs of the conference. DraftKings has them as the second choice for the conference champs. I just do not see it at all. I am just so opposite the market here. And usually when I see something like that, this is like more case for me I got to find value somewhere. 2 alternatives to Boise so far are I've got huge problems with them. This one especially. Again, this is why this had the cigar painting where it's just, I'm just smoking a cigar and sitting this conference race out. I'm just watching, but not betting. Duck, what am I missing on the market in terms of the Bulldogs? Am I smarter than everybody else?
Yeah, from a futures perspective, I'm not rushing to the window to make a play on Fresno to win the league. I think the coaching change late in the game will rear its ugly head at some point, and I think that this team is just in one of those weird transition years,
Yeah.
right, where
Yep.
Tedford's gone, and what's the team really going to be? We talked about the fall, the collapse with Air Force, and Fresno went through the same thing, right? They were 8-1. They had just beaten Boise State. They need to win one of their next three to clinch a spot in the conference title game, and they lose at San Jose. They lose at home as 23.5 point favorites against New Mexico, and then they lose at San Diego State to end the season in a game where they couldn't score. And I think they had 3 points going into the fourth quarter. It was just really weird how those last three games,
Yeah.
they really, for a chance to play for a conference title, it's really shocking how you could play that badly over a 3 week stretch. There's other parts of me that think, I don't know, I really what they bring back on offense. I think that they can be explosive at times if things go their way. They're a little up and down, so I don't really have a strong lean either way. I think the schedule does the schedule does line up pretty favorably though. When you look at the teams on this slate, they play the bottom four in the league. So they play New Mexico, they play Nevada, they play Hawaii and San Jose State. And in the non-conference, they have Sac State and New Mexico State. So there's your 6 wins. I don't know if UNLV is unwinnable. I don't know if Wazoo is unwinnable. I don't know if at UCLA to end the year is unwinnable. I don't think much of UCLA, and I think UCLA is going to be really down this year. So, from a regular season win standpoint, I don't know. I wouldn't rush to the window on over 8. I think you could find a 7.5 juice that could be an option if you really want to go that route. The only strong opinion I have on Fresno State is they're catching 21.5 at Michigan and to start the season. And this is a horrific spot for Michigan. Off the national title, everybody's gone. It's really a big rebuild for Michigan. Everyone's patting them on the back, telling them how good they are. And Michigan in week 2 plays Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And you are crazy to think that Michigan is going to start their Texas prep on September 1st. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be something that those guys are prepping for Texas now. And I just don't sense that Michigan is going to have a tremendous amount of people in their locker room that are really fired up in practice saying, yeah, we got to pound Fresno. We got to really crush Fresno because they're going to be focused on the horns. And so I think they'll run out onto the field fired up. Michigan will. I think coming out of the locker room, they'll be fired up. But they're going to play like they practice. And in this first game of the season, I think, and we've seen Fresno go to various road stadiums in the past and they've played up. So I think my only strong opinion on Fresno is that I have a Fresno plus 21.5 in week 1. I have a ticket in pocket, and I really like the way that this first particular game situation breaks down for Fresno. And I think the coaching change will eventually rear its ugly head, but I don't think it's going to happen in week 1, losing Tedford. So I would play Fresno in week 1. I did make that bet. And that's really the only strong position I have either way for this team. I could see anywhere from 9-3 to 6-6 on the season. So I think that it could be up and down, some turmoil, some locker room stuff that could go on later on with coaching change and Tim Skipper jumping in there. But I think they're in a really good week 1 situation.
Wow. We really differ on that. I cannot see them winning 9 games, but I just don't see. I don't see the offense there. Just without Tedford just to fix it to the extent that he. Who knows without him to over what he did last year? That concerns me. Are you as concerned as I am, Robert? Are you more bullish here?
Well, a couple of things. I'm gonna take both sides of this. I could see them either covering the spread against Michigan or possibly even beating Michigan, but then also going under 8. That's crazy, but it's possible, right? The thing is, and it's a good point that he made, is the fact that when you're looking at a new coaching change, it takes a while for that to kick in, right? Jeff Tedford, look, he's still the person featured in, okay, here you go. He's still in Phil Still. There's Jeff Tedford right there. So this was a very recent coaching change. This was a recent coaching change made on a necessity. So a lot of your summer practices, especially all your spring practices, are with the old coach, right? That's an important thing to consider here, which is the fact that, yes, eventually this team will change. But if you're going to be basically a lot of the systems that coach installed are definitely still functioning. He only retired a couple weeks ago, basically, sometime in July, I think. So again, not horrible, but also not the longest amount of time ago, right? There's also going to be, again, because he was the coach and you had to he medically retired, right? I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, medical
Yeah.
retirement. So in that case, there is going to be a huge push to be like, let's go win one for coach. Let's go win one for coach. And then you get that. And again, a lot of question marks about Michigan. A lot of question marks. And again, the important thing, and as Stefan said, you're looking at the next week. You're looking at Texas, right? That's a massive game, huge national title implications. You're not focusing on this Fresno State team, right? So all the ingredients are there for a massive upset, or at least a covering of a 21-point spread. But then you look at the rest of the schedule, right? Okay, you've got UNLV. It's not a bad schedule though. No, it's actually not that horrible. You got San Jose State on there. You got UNLV. You've got maybe Hawaii, San Jose State, but like it's not that bad. Colorado State, but there's only a handful of losses there. So I think the 8 is about right. Do I think this team will compete for the conference championship game? Maybe. I wouldn't have them up that high. I wouldn't have them as my second choice, like the second highest ranking, but they potentially could. Could they? I think basically it's going to be something along the lines of they give Michigan a good fight, and then they slowly fade as the season goes on. That's my thinking on it.
Yeah.
Interestingly, too, some of the blended power ratings that I have leaned into, they could be favored in 9 or 10 games. And outside of the Michigan game, their only real other dog roll is at UCLA. Otherwise, they're double digit favorites in 7. So I think the perception on Fresno and Buck, that's what you're thinking is the perception on Fresno is real strong, and
Yeah.
you're being it's a contrarian play against public perception, right? That Fresno is rock solid, and maybe there's a chink in the armor, so to speak.
Yeah. And yet again, where Robert zigged and zagged on the schedule and how tough it is. That's why it's just so hard to make plays here. I just, that offense, I have so little faith in it that I want to fade them. You've got so many teams that are just coin flips. And Jesus, you start off just Sacramento State, New Mexico, and Nevada are just 4 automatics, as automatic as they get this season. Maybe not New Mexico, but just they're New Mexico's a 10-point dog to Montana State, for God's sake. Yeah, I don't know. The Mountain West 2024, everybody. Make of it what you will. All right. Landed here. UNLV, despite the rather alarming now, hey, they made great progress under Barry Odom, but was it Barry Odom? The defensive rating was about the same, tiny step back, not significant. Defensive guy did not move the defense up. That's a bit of a concern. Now, UNLV was one of those teams last season. You saw a lot of UNLV along the depth charts in your Phil Steele on a lot of other teams. I think we could call it the UNLV diaspora, if you will. So it's not like he had a bunch to work with. Maybe they improve. I'd like to have seen the big step up on defense instead of offense. I'm blanking on his name. Brennan Marion came in. He moved the offense up. He was dealing with a new quarterback, did it with a freshman quarterback. Now, unfortunately, because the young man is very smart and likes to be in nice weather and among beautiful women, he went to the University of Southern California. Thank you very much. But his replacement, not a bad replacement, this Sluka kid. We've crapped on some of these FCS transfers where they don't really have great numbers coming in. I like this. 129 Apex at Holy Cross, rushed for over 1,200 yards. Robert, he had basically the same GGAB as your Gators, who didn't have a bad offense last season. Just this kid alone did
Really?
as a quarterback. And you don't know how it's going to translate from FCS to the Mountain West, but he's got a good receiver too. Ricky White actually was number 3 in the entire country in Ryan last season. I've got enough pieces here, and there's almost a bit of certainty. Despite losing Maeva, you have a good receiver. I like a very known quantity and offensive coordinator. I like the pieces here. What I don't like, maybe Odom he should improve the defense. Let's hope. For a 9-win team, their best win was at Air Force. Now it was I guess we call them Tailspin Air Force. So I'm not sure how great of a win that is. They do get Boise at home this season. See a 7.5 under. I don't know. Might be worth a play for Mountain West champs. Just using the schedule's not as forgiving in conference. We saw for a couple of teams already, but I wouldn't be surprised. There's no game that I see on the schedule I'd be surprised if they win. So for me at 550, it's not the worst bet in the world. I'll probably put a small bet on it, but just for as a conversation piece, and that's just about it. Are you buying Matthew Sluka, Duck?
So a couple things. Matthew Sluka was incredible at Holy Cross. I actually had a chance to see him play live in their playoff game a couple years ago when they played at South Dakota State, but I'll get into that another day. That he's a dude, and honestly, if you're wondering if the talent and the skill set will translate to the FBS level, just look at the games that he played with Holy Cross teammates against FBS competition, and they played their absolute best. Last year at Boston College, he played really well. They lost by 3. At Army, he played really well. They lost by 3. 2022 at Buffalo, he played exceptionally well. They won the game on the field. 2021 at Connecticut, he played exceptionally well. They won the game on the field. He's a guy who his skill set will absolutely translate to the FBS level. The only problem for Sluka is he hasn't quite won the job yet. He's still neck and neck with Haj Malik Williams, who played at Campbell University and has an equally electrifying skill set. He rewrote the record books at Campbell and single-handedly won a lot of people a lot of money when they caught fire with the Camels last year and the year before that. Haj Malik Williams actually could also play into this quarterback race, but either way, two very capable guys. And what I would like to see, because with the Brendan Marion go-go offense, it's a unique offensive set. They run a lot of goofy formations. They do some motion to try to confuse the defense. They'll oftentimes be in the gun, and they'll have two running backs on the same side of the quarterback. So there's just some unique stuff that you don't see a lot. They could use both quarterbacks on the field at the same time, and there's talks that they may do that, similar to Ivy League Princeton did that at times a couple years ago and had success, where they had a couple different quarterbacks on the field at the same time and ran some unique things to confuse defenses. It'll be really interesting to see who wins the job and to see where UNLV goes. UNLV has studs on the outside too. Their passing game is going to, at least the receiver group is going to be really solid. I firmly believe they should have one of the Mountain West best offensive lines. And really, they're probably going to find themselves in quite a few high scoring affairs this year. So it could be really electrifying to see. And I think their opener at Houston will be very telling to see what we're going to expect from this team this year. Houston's going through some transition, so I'm really going to be tuned into UNLV at Houston in week 1 to really learn a lot about UNLV. Just was last year a mirage? We really don't know, right? We've got a situation where now UNLV is playing with expectation, and they really piled on the wins last year, but look at the teams that they played. Look at the teams that they play this year. Their schedule is a little bit more challenging from the perspective of they play at Kansas,
Yep.
they host Syracuse, they're at Oregon State, they host Boise State. So they've got some of these teams at the upper end of the conference, and I don't know if it sets up well for Vegas this year. They'll certainly be electrifying, but I don't know. Plus 600, I would want a little more on them to win the league if I was rushing to the window to try to make a play on them to win the conference. Because I think the other thing that you could find is if they get into the Mountain West Championship game, as they did last year, are they going to go to Boise and win? They hosted the game last year and lost by 4 touchdowns. So it's one of those things where I have to see it with UNLV. I have to see them take that next step. And I'm not saying they can't, but at plus 600, not enough for me.
Okay. I can see that argument too. This is not the easiest conference I've ever tried to break down. What do you think, Robert?
Yeah, I actually do this team. I could definitely see them getting to the conference championship game. Not without some losses here or there, though, right? You're playing two Big 12 teams, right? So that right off the bat, that's not fun. But then to Pac-2, you get Oregon State for the Pac-2, not horrible. You get San Jose State And actually, you have Syracuse there. You have Syracuse, another ACC team, right? And you have Fresno, and you have Boise on there. So you have some tough teams. But if you could go, say, 2-3 through that stretch with those tough teams, maybe split the Houston, Kansas, win one, lose one, probably beat Houston, lose to Kansas, and then if you could beat Syracuse, you've got a shot, right? I think that obviously with Matthew Sluka, I think it's a fascinating thing. It seems like a really good quarterback in the same vein as Cameron Ward from a few years ago. He came up to not Mountain West school, obviously Washington State, but now a functional Mountain West school. So I feel like a similar kind of trajectory to that. And then again, he had some really fun moments that year. But that wasn't really the year when people were like, okay, he's good. He needs to mature a little bit. Then he did mature, right? So I think we could be looking at a similar trajectory to that. So this is one where let's see what UNLV can do this year. I agree the plus 600 is a little short, but I think they could definitely win the Mountain West, right? It's definitely a possibility. Although I like them and I'll be following them through the year, and I think they have a half decent shot at doing this. I think plus 600 is just a little too low for me on that.
What's really going to be important is the transfers and if the transfers hit. And I've got 5 of them identified. So obviously, whether it's Sluka or Haj Malik Williams at quarterback, if one of those players hits and is a success, the team is going to be electric. They need to develop a third receiver, and they've got this guy, Casey Kane, who played at Texas. If he develops into a third receiver in the slot, that'll free up their first 2 options. But Ricky White, who's going to see double coverage unless they have a third option emerge, Ricky White is uncoverable in the Mountain West. So if he can get freed up, again, more explosion in the passing game, which is just going to open up the between the tackles running that they want to do with the go offense. Thirdly, their secondary needs work, but they brought in Malik Chavis from Arkansas and also stud safety Jalen Catalon, who was actually a captain at Arkansas, and he had some injuries and things that were going on there. But if those transfers hit, then this team will certainly be a team that can make a jump. A little bit unknown, but the transfers have to connect, and there's certainly every reason to believe that they will.
Couple of interesting things you said there. Casey Kane, I'm sure that his position coach at Texas was Brendan Marion, so that's interesting. And didn't Catalan, he was at Arkansas and he was at Texas last year.
Yes.
So he played for Barry Odom there too. I think you've got that. Those are 2 interesting little pieces right there in terms of like, all right, both those coaches have 1 year in the conference and they believe that those players, they know them better than probably anybody else in the coaching and say, yeah, these guys can play in this conference. And the players feel comfortable with them too, which I think makes for a quicker assimilation, if anything. That's really interesting. I'm going to talk you into this team, Duck. I'm kidding.
I won't have to be my arm won't have to be twisted that hard. I'm on the fence either way.
Yeah, yeah.
A scheduling note that I wanted just to make, and we'll get on this team later on in the podcast. But what is the point total going to be when they host San Diego State?
Oh my God. Yeah. Who knows?
I mean,
Yeah.
it could be like 72 and a half by the time those 2 offenses collide. It could be wild. So that's one to just make note of, and that's going to be something must-see TV for sure.
Speaking of which, the just mentioned San Diego State Aztecs. Been a big fan of their head coach, Sean Lewis, since basically he showed proof of life at Kent State, which is not an easy thing to do. Here we go. Here's the old guy movie reference that nobody gets. That's the college football equivalent of Stand and Deliver. For those of you that have seen any movies that were filmed in the 1980s, both of you guys are staring blankly, so you clearly don't know what that is. Good movie. Look it up, Stand and Deliver, especially if, like all 3 of us, if you think math is power, then you'll like that. It's a great movie. This team was just, they had to change coaches. I'm notwithstanding explaining the graphics on here, I'm just about done crapping on Brady, what's his name, because he just gave us a wealth of material over the years. Still had AJ Duffy as new quarterback. Apparently that is not accurate anymore, and Duck can fill us in on that. Inexperienced offensive line, although this is not going to be the first time that Sean Lewis has had to deal with a really horrible offensive line. See last season. They are starting over completely on defense. There are only 8 defenses that basically are red, basically meaning way below average in all 4 experience and improvement metrics from last season. The only one that had a worse defensive power rating was Temple. That's really elite company. Congratulations, Brady Hoke. If you're wondering what these fingerprints are, all the bad news is just Brady Hoke's fingerprints on this program. That's as I was going through this, it's man, this has nothing to do with Sean Lewis. This is just Brady Hoke hangover here. And you're seeing it this year. I'm really interested in that week 5 game at Central Michigan. I think we talked about in the MAC preview, did we not, about this specific game? Because Lewis knows basically that program from his MAC days, and that pass defense stinks. So really curious about how that'll stack up. Can't bet their season win total. This is almost maybe in some ways even more of a blank canvas than Air Force is, and not betting them as at Mountain West champs. I'm looking for them to punch above their weight at some times this season. Like I said, week 5 at Central Michigan, that's going to really just inform me as to whether it's going to be a team worth watching the rest of the season. But very much a blank slate for me, starting with the quarterback who, Phil Steele and I have wrong here. So do you want to start with setting that straight, Duck?
Yeah, I will. First off, I love the hire. Sean Lewis is going to, if he sticks around, build this program and make San Diego State what we've been accustomed to, which is a Mountain West power. And I think that they're in a great recruiting hotbed. They have a good stadium. They're in a good location. And I think that the trend is certainly going to be upward, but I just don't know that they have the personnel, right? So they brought in A.J. Duffy from Florida State to run this offense. As of yesterday, he didn't win the job. They're giving the job to freshman Danny O'Neal. So that's who's going to be the number one. A couple offensive pieces that I do. Sean Lewis reunites with Marquez Cooper, who was a running back of his at Kent State. And they have a couple guys on the receiving core that they do. And I think a couple things that we should draw from the defensive metrics, and as porous as they were, their offense was methodical and slow paced and tried to keep the defense on the sidelines. And those defensive metrics were so bad given the slower pace. They didn't see even nearly as many snaps. And now they're going to see 85 defensive snaps per game because the offense is going to go lightning quick.
Yeah.
That the defense is going to likely get exposed because the improvement with only 4 returning starters is just not going to be there. Furthermore, I don't like the schedule, and I've only got them favored in 4 games. And of those 4 games, really only 2 that they're decided favorites. I've got them by about 1.5 at Central Michigan and about 3 points at hosting Hawaii. So I took a position on under 5.5, and it's not a reflection of Sean Lewis. It's not a reflection of where I think this program is going to go. I just don't know that they have the personnel to do what they want to do on offense necessarily. At least it's going to take some time, and they're going to take some licks. Look at the early slate. We'll talk about the A&M Commerce game here in just a minute, but Oregon State, at Cal, at Central Michigan. They play Wazoo, at Boise, at UNLV, Air Force, at Utah State. I just don't see the pieces to a winning campaign this year. And it starts and ends with their lack of personnel. You mentioned the offensive line. They've got a lot of new personnel on the offensive line. They're learning completely new schemes. The conditioning is going to be a factor because they're going to play exceedingly fast, much more fast than these players are accustomed to playing. They're not going to huddle. They're going to try to snap the ball within 15 to 17 seconds as opposed to using the entire play clock. And it's just hard to condition the body to do so when you have 3 weeks of fall camp to get it done. So I don't think that you're going to see a lot of wins. I think that the scheme on defense is going to just be a unit that struggles because of the style that they're going to play on offense, and they're changing schemes. They're going to the 4-2-5 from the 3-3-5, and that's going to take some time. So you may have people out of position. There's new coordinators. Everything is going to be new, and it's hard to simulate live game reps. And so until the pads actually pop against an opponent and not your practice teammates, it's going to be really hard to assess where they're at.
Yeah, couple things. I pride myself on being ruthlessly objective, but even I cannot bring myself to go against Sean Lewis in any way. I just like the guy and he scares me. I just noticed too that you've got a Sean Lewis look there with the hairstyle and the beard.
A little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm bringing the Sean Lewis approach to the sports book and to the pay window.
I'll co-sign that. Robert, very different without our guy Brady Hoke ruining things in San Diego, yes?
Yes, it is different. That's a positive, I think, but that's where the positives end. I think for this team for this year, right? Brand new quarterback, threw 7 passes at Florida State 2 years ago. It's not particularly. I'm not like, oh yeah, that's positive. The defense is in bad shape. Lost a lot of the. Didn't have a ton of returning. Lost some of it as well. This team will eventually be good. Sean Lewis, that's not the greatest record, but
It's Kent
okay. This
State.
team, I know. It is. Again, it's hard. This is probably better than Kent State for sure. But again, it's not. We'll see. I'm not. This year is going to be rough for this team. I think this is going to be pretty rough. I the under. I'm not going to touch it though. It's a bit too high. If it was plus money, I take the under. But again, this team is going to be really bad on defense. I really question where they're going to be on offense. Again, and this is a theme you're going to see with some of these quarterbacks in the Mountain West. Oh, this guy, again, we saw that in the first one with Boise, right? Oh, Malachi Nelson, he was a quarterback at USC. Didn't do much at USC, right? Oh, this guy was at Florida State. He threw 7 passes. Okay, now he's here, right? This is like the guy that they recruited. They thought, oh, this is like a top 20 quarterback or something, and then he just wasn't. And then now they're in the Mountain West. I think that's like a recurring theme. This is like when you're dumping, like when they dump stocks at like low prices. This is basically what that is, except they're just dumping them in the Mountain West now. So not the greatest starting off point for that. Again, I think this team will have a rough year. Could they improve in the next few years? Yes. But again, yeah, the Brady Hoke fingerprints are all over this. It's going to take them a while to retool and rebuild, and I don't think that's happening this year.
No, yeah. I hope you got a long contract. Very many worse place in the world than you can try to rebuild things in San Diego State. My gosh, that's about as good as it gets in terms of like locales to take your time to get a program in place.
I just want to say too, if
Yeah.
I could, real quick on San Diego State, we saw this happen in 2021 with Western Kentucky, where they had coaching changes, they had a philosophy change on offense, they had a complete overhaul when they went from a slower, methodical approach to Bailey Zappi and crew from Houston Baptist, and they brought in this high-flying offense. And the sports books were completely caught off guard about it, and so much, in fact, that in 2021, when Bailey Zappi and all those guys got there, they played their first game of the season against FCS UT Martin, and the total on that game opened at 42 and a half,
Oh my God.
and then was wide with wide liquidity. It was like 48 and a half, and it closed at 61 and a half, and the final was 59 to 21. So one thing that I want to be cognizant of, because there are quite a few FCS versus FBS week 1 lines out there, widely available for bet on with many shops, so there's quite a bit of liquidity out there. But Texas A&M Commerce and San Diego State is not one of those, and A&M Commerce had a really bad offense last year, and they played in quite a few low scoring games, even in the Southland. And let's just see if they're asleep at the wheel, because if this total comes out in the 40s, it's just one of those situations where there's just a complete overhaul of this team, and a total in the 40s is not where it should be.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Excuse me. All right, Hawaii. I didn't expect to really expect anything here, and it's not like I'm in love with this team, but I think a lot of this is just being one of the few teams that actually is in year 3 of their head coach. I think they're ahead of some other teams just in terms of that. Timmy Chang, if you had told me when they hired him that he would be 8-8 team the first season, I wouldn't have believed it. Things were looking so bleak when he took over. Timmy Chang was a record-setting quarterback at Hawaii. He took over after Todd Graham was literally fired by the Hawaii Senate, which, if I don't know, that'll make a great Netflix like 45-minute piece. What a
Or 30 for 30.
Yeah, what an amazing story. I don't like exactly where their offense is, but there was a big improvement. The team apex year 1 under Chang, the team apex was 55. Improved to a 77. That's not great, but it's a big step forward. They have the most returning Ryan in the Mountain West, which, considering how just completely their roster was gutted 2 years ago, says a lot. I see some pieces that just impress me in a conference with a lot of unknowns. There's pieces I can grab onto here. The GGAB is low here, but they are the most run and shoot of the run and shoot teams in all of FBS. They have the lowest rush percentage in all of FBS. They run only 37% of the time. The average is, I think, 51 or 52% of called runs. Interestingly, they passed on the usual 13 regular season games. They have 3 buys this season, which have not seen that before. Really impressed with this huge defensive improvement. Their defense was horrible in 2022. Big step forward. You're improving by 7.5 points. That's a big step forward. And they have the second highest improvement metric on defense in the conference this season. 5, I think I'm going to bet that over. I see way more than 5 winnable games, and I run through my win percentage, my win probability percentages. I can get there without much of a problem. They're not going to win the conference. I was surprised to land in such a positive spot here. Don't know if what your thoughts are. Let me know, Robert. What do you think about the Rainbow Warriors here?
Yeah, he's this team is fun, right?
Yeah,
It was really bad. It was really bad in 22. Last year, decidedly less bad, 5-8. They keep Brad and Shager. That's obviously the most important piece of that. He was again really fun. Last fun is the word there. Some games really good, some games really bad. That's called an 80 apex. That's exactly what that means. Yeah, I again, this team improved a lot from year 1 to year 2. This is now year 3. Do I think we're going to be in do I think we're going to be competitive to like do I think they're going to be competitive to win the Mountain West? No. But could this team be on the doorstep of that this year? Possibly, right? I don't they don't have the pieces for it, but again, Hawaii is one of those ones where and again, you have a lot of these teams that you play at home, right? Sam Houston at home. San Diego State, not the greatest thing, but Washington State, okay, right? You do have to go to Boise.
no, no, they're hosting
Um,
Boise.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Oh, sorry, they're hosting Boise, so you get to host Boise and UNLV. That's pretty good. You do have to go to Sam Houston, but that's not particularly scary. Another one I want to point out is that actually, first of all, they played Delaware State week 1, and they're I think
Zero,
seen.
to be honest.
Sorry, week 0. Yep, that's right, week 0. My bad. That is on Sunday at midnight, and they are 38.5 point favorites against Delaware State, which will be an FBS team next year. So that's cool to note. Week 1 though, UCLA at UCLA. They are do you know what the spread is? Can you guess what the spread is?
I'm gonna
It's
guess
13 and a half. It was 19 and it was 19 at the beginning of the summer and it's
Yeah.
down to 13 and a half.
Yeah, I'm seeing 13 on my book. Yeah, I see the wow from you. That is a giant sign saying trap. This is a trap. That is a giant trap. 100%. That is they're losing. They're going to win that game. You don't hang 13. 13 is such a weird number to put in that spot. That's if I am not. I would if you're thinking of betting UCLA in that spot, do not do that. That's the book saying you could straight up lose. And I like again, this is where I think this team could be fun, right? UCLA traveling to Hawaii week 1. Every problem that UCLA has, and you're now going to go to. I think they're still in basically a high school stadium in Hawaii too. I don't think they've actually opened their new stadium in Hawaii. So that sounds fun, right? So yeah, like this is where this team could definitely clear the 5 wins. I don't think they're going to be competitive in the conference, but this is the team that I'm like, and again, as we go through all the team previews, I keep saying, oh, they have to play Hawaii, they have to play Hawaii. That's the team that could like any given week, this team could get that upset, right? And that's what I view this team as this year.
Yeah. Do you know, Doc? Just throw it to you on this. Do they have that home field thing fixed yet, or are they still playing like in a parking lot?
The stadium is fully completed on campus. They were in
Okay.
the Aloha Bowl or whatever they call that, which was where the Pro Bowl was played every year. But now their stadium is on campus. It's a lot more intimate, a lot less seating, and that is fully completed.
Okay. Cool.
Oh, nice. Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, are you as sneakily half sold on this team as I am?
Yeah, so there's a lot that's going on, and I'll start first with the run and shoot, which is what Hawaii and Timmy Chang run on offense. And it's such a unique offense, and it's so hard to grasp. So if you think about football and all the other different offensive schemes that are out there, you call a play either at the line or in the huddle, and you can maybe check out of it, but you're still running a play when the ball is snapped, and you have an idea of what that play is going to be. With the run and shoot, You are in 90% of the time, you're in 2-by-2 formations, and you're always in 10 personnel. So what that means is one running back, zero tight ends, and four receivers, and there's two on each side. And instead of calling a play with defined routes, you call a concept, and those routes change on the fly. And so this system was made popular by the Houston Oilers in the 80s, but it's very difficult to grasp, and it's hard to make the reads when you are not 1,000% committed to your route that you're running before the ball is snapped, and there's changes that are made in play, and it's just hard. And so at times last year, you would see Shager almost seem flippant with the football, and that's why he threw so many interceptions. But about half those interceptions were just miscommunication with the receivers because they just don't have that down, right? It takes 10,000 snaps of running the run and shoot before you're a master at it, and that progression happens from year 2 to year 3. And so what I think that we're going to see is we're going to see a lot of growth. I think Shager's a dude, and I think he's going to have a great season for Hawaii. I think the running back room is serviceable for what they're going to use. They didn't run the football very well last year, but that's also not really their scheme. And even going back to the Nick Rolovich days, they were a great offensive team, but they just didn't run the ball exceedingly. We saw Wazoo do that as well with some of their concepts. But the scheme, the point of it is that the run and shoot scheme is so difficult to grasp, and once you do, it's a system that can torch anybody. And so I look for growth there. I think that the receiver room is loaded. A key happening for Hawaii this month is that their stud receiver, the best receiver on their team, Stephen McBride, was suspended after being arrested this summer, and I don't know how that's going to get adjudicated out. As of 5 o'clock p.m. today, he's not on the two deep that was posted for the Delaware State game. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he's not on the roster, but he may be serving a one-game suspension, which will not rear its ugly head against Delaware State, and I'll get to that in a moment. The schedule is unique. They're playing this game against Delaware State because Oregon pulled the plug on a previously scheduled game, and so Hawaii was left having to fill the schedule, and they were scrambling. I think, Buck, you alluded to this earlier, where a lot of the guys in these conferences that are making all the big money, they can't really think about the easy logic. Ball State is off in week 1. Why are they not playing Ball State in this game instead of Delaware State? It makes sense that both those teams needed a game. But either way, that's for another conversation. So Hawaii elected not to play a 13th game, and that really could hurt them this year because they have two FCS foes on the schedule, so they have to win 7 games to go bowling. Only one of those FCS wins is going to count towards bowl eligibility, so they actually have to go 7-5, presuming that they beat Delaware State and Northern Iowa, which I suspect that they will. I am high on Hawaii. Long-winded answer is I'm high on Hawaii from a bet-on perspective. I think the schedule sets up nicely for them to catch some teams at home, ATS, where they're going to be great to back as a dog, and the UCLA game is a game where I bet them early in the summer at plus 17.5. I reloaded on them at plus 14, and I feel really confident that they're going to be in that game late into the fourth quarter. It's not a late game in Hawaii. It's about a 3 o'clock in the afternoon local Hawaii kick. This is going to be on big CBS at 7 o'clock.
Really?
Yes, big CBS, not CBS Sports Network. So
I love it. That's wow. Awesome.
Mm-hmm. And a game that I fully expect them to come out in. Now, I wouldn't bet them to win the conference. I did find recently, and it's still out there, you can find a juiced over 4.5, and it was at like minus 165 or 170, and that seems like a lot of juice. But I will say this, really the quickest and easiest way that you can improve your position as a bettor when you're trying to take this from just something to do and make it profitable is get the best lines, find the best odds. And with regular season wins, I value a half a win about 60 or 70 cents. So you can do the math on that. If you can get a 4.5 at that one, anything under 180, and the math works out in your favor to take that. So I would find a 4.5 and play that.
Yeah.
Now, regarding Delaware State, Robert, I do hate to correct you, but it's actually it's the Delaware Blue Hens that are moving up. So the Fighting Joe Flaccos that are moving up. Very different team. This is MEAC bottom feeder Delaware State, and I really cannot stress enough how bad Delaware State was, and has been. They were 1-10 last year in FCS. Their one win was against NCCAA foe, Virginia Lynchburg. Now, this team, Virginia Lynchburg, was so messed up with their funding that they could not pay their coach's salary. They didn't have a training staff on,
Awesome.
a paid training staff. Their players were living in dormitories that had holes in the floor. It's just not even a real football team. Delaware State also lost against Division II foe, not FCS foe, but Division II Bowie State. And so this is a team that was overmatched against really weak competition. And while there's not a lot of literature posted on some of these MEAC bottom feeders, they don't have a lot of information on the two deep and very little information on fall camp. You cannot power rate Delaware State low enough. One thing that I'll say, my Twitter feed will be able to remember this, but about a month ago, FanDuel put out a sloppy Hawaii minus 27 and a half. And I was all over that, posted it, talked about it with everyone who would listen to take Hawaii minus 27 and a half. So that's what I have on the game. I still like it at 37 and a half. I think that you'll find, looking at how Delaware State plays when they play FBS competition, last year, all you have to do is look at the Army game, 57-0, and they provided absolutely no resistance whatsoever against Army. In fact, Army passed for 238 yards against Delaware State
That
on
is awesome.
11 completions.
I love that. Oh my God.
And so it's a hard thing to do when you're trying to look at week 0 and Hawaii laying a big number. You cannot power rate this game large enough. I have the power rating estimated line at 44 and a half. So at 37 and a half, I would have no issue playing Hawaii or find a Hawaii team total over. This is going to be one of those situations where Delaware State gets off the bus and right away that they do not even have the same athletes on the field. It's really going to be bad for them.
Oh my, that is awesome information.
And then one last, I know I've been
Please,
long winded,
no,
but
go
really
ahead.
short, but
Yeah.
an FCS nugget on Delaware State. So this Delaware State game against Hawaii is kicking off at midnight Delaware State
Oh my
time.
God, that's right.
They're gonna start. They're gonna stay the night in Hawaii, and then when are they gonna get home? Monday. So then what happens is you get home, you have to regroup, you're going to have to spend some time in the injury room, you're going to maybe get a couple practices in, and then what's going to happen next is they don't have any additional time in their second game of the season, which is FCS week 1. They're at Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart's not a good football team, but they'll probably be about 9.5. And one thing that is assured is this is a horrific travel spot for Delaware State. They're not going to stay 2 nights in a hotel, and this game is being played on Saturday at 6 p.m., their second game of the season at Sacred Heart. So that's going to be a same day 250-mile bus trip for Delaware State, and it's going to be brutal.
Holy crap. Oh my God. That is
So
awesome
just from
information. That is fantastic.
purely a
So
travel standpoint, Delaware State is not going to have much left in the tank. They're going to have jet lag getting back. They're going to have bus legs, same day travel, and it's going to be a butt kicking for them in their second game in week 1 as well.
so yeah, you think that they're gonna fly out that day to Hawaii?
No,
No, I think they're going to get back from Hawaii on Monday, and then they're
Yeah.
going to spend Tuesday recovering. They're going to practice on Wednesday and Thursday. They'll probably do a Friday walk around. And I would guess because they're not going to, they probably won't spend 2 nights in a hotel to travel the 4.5 hours to Connecticut. They're probably going to leave at 6 or 7 a.m. on Saturday morning to arrive for a Saturday 6 p.m. game in Connecticut from Delaware, which is just a brutal travel spot. But that's what the funding calls for. They're in the MEAC. They
no.
don't have a lot of resources. They're probably not going to spend 2 nights in a hotel for a game that's 4 hours away.
So then they're gonna. So they'll. Yeah. When are they gonna leave then? Are they just gonna leave that day
That's
to go to
insane.
Hawaii then?
Saturday. No, no, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no.
So they would leave Saturday morning,
No,
super early in the morning.
no,
Not
we're talking
Hawaii.
about the next week after Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
After
then the
Hawaii,
next
when they
week.
take a bus to Connecticut.
Oh, yeah. That's rough. Yeah. Yeah. I'm saying 38 and a half. That seems pretty fun. Yeah.
All right. We spent a lot.
If Hawaii does not put up a 52, 55, or 59, then something will be substantially wrong because it's just this Delaware State team will provide no resistance to Hawaii in the run and shoot.
Awesome information on Delaware State. Just a little bit more, just because this is another one of these games I'm very nerdily fascinated by. Hawaii at Sam Houston. I'm guessing that line would be, I would have that Hawaii about 12, 13. Does that seem right to you? What would you have that at?
My power ratings have Sam Houston as a 2-point favorite.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not, and
Okay,
Hawaii is a vastly different team off the island, so it's really hard
that's
to
true.
bank on Hawaii winning a lot of games on the road.
Wow. Okay. At what? Okay, let me ask you this: at what number would you bet Sam Houston in that game?
I think the schedule spot calls for, let me pull it up here real quick. Hawaii's off a bye, and Sam Houston is off getting their teeth kicked in by UCF.
Mm-hmm.
So probably I would want Sam Houston at least +6 is what I would want.
Okay. Yeah, I'm way. I have Keegan Shoemaker PTSD. I think I'd want 10 points more than that before I would bite. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If I want a good point about them being a different team on the mainland, but that might be an opportunity for me. Number should be there. All right. A lot about Hawaii, but that was good discussion. That was really good information. Don't know if I can go down this road again. I love Jay Norvell. Not a great record here so far. The offense has taken a step back. I can understand starting over and just going totally different from what's his name, Adazio did. A little bit of improvement last year. That was the new quarterback too. So I can see the narrative if you want to believe. Torrey Horton, really great 22, not a great 23. Probably again because of the new quarterback. Overall, the new quarterback, Fowler Nicolosi, not a great apex, but it was his first year starting, and he did have three. It's not like he's hopeless. He had 3 games of an apex of 108 or better, which these are not the most awesome defenses in the world, but still 3 times. I think there's hope there, and if you saw him in the right games, you can see he's good. Just boy, when he just makes some dumb decisions, it's really dumb. Season win total is 6. Juiced heavily towards the over. I just can't again this year. I want to. I like Norvell, but I can't put my money behind it. I'll be rooting for him, just not betting on him. What about you, Duck?
So we talked about Shager and their offensive system, and he had a lot of interceptions and not being flippant with the ball. Braden Fowler Nicolosi was flippant with the football. He would force the ball when he didn't have to, and he was able to make some plays and at least create some time to find receivers once the play broke down, which happened quite a bit. And he would force the ball when he just didn't need to, and it caused for just untimely turnovers, and it single-handedly cost them the Colorado game. It cost them the UNLV game, and it really caused them to be too far behind at Hawaii in their last game of the season playing for bowl eligibility, and they came all the way back and couldn't finish the job. And so it really is a point of emphasis for them this year that he's got to protect the football, right? Because they have such explosive guys in the skill room, and I think they're planning for the offensive line to be vastly improved and have more continuity, and they're going to focus more on running the football, which they did not do very well last year. It's just purely a numbers play for me because I have Colorado State favored in 7, and I feel like the Mountain West slate is fairly manageable with no Boise and no UNLV,
Yeah,
and they host Wyoming. It's really comes down to at Fresno. I took a plus 1,600 on them to win the league just because I think there's a chance they get to the conference title game when you factor in the teams that they play in conference. They host San Jose, they host New Mexico, they host Wyoming, they host Utah State. All winnable games, certainly. They're at Nevada, winnable. At Air Force, winnable. They'll probably be a touchdown dog at Fresno, but we've already talked about where they play Fresno during the season, that Fresno issues could start to rear. At Fresno, I don't see a game that's what I would classify as unwinnable.
yeah,
And the non-con, yeah, they're not going to beat Texas, but Northern Colorado they'll blast. Must see TV when they play the Buffaloes,
yeah.
right? That was a game, one of the games of the year last year, early on in primetime TV, and that was one that you'll remember forever with all the different storylines and the plays and the big swings and momentum. That was just a massive game, and I'm going to go back to the window with them in this game again this year. They're already at some shops have like a +9 or +8.5 or +10, and we'll see where it shakes out. I'm not running for game of the year lines, but if they're plus 10 or plus 11, I'll be on the Rams that week too. So I think there's definitely going to be some growth. Defense has to play better, and I think that they're going to be okay in the back seven, right? Their linebacking group is going to be okay, at least from the starters. Depth will be a concern at linebacker, and the safeties and corner positions should allow for them to have more success in pass defense. I certainly hope. Alvin Kamara is a huge loss on the D end position, and you just don't replace a guy like that overnight. So there are some holes. I think that it's time, right, for Jay Norvell. It's kind of time to take that next step. It's what we talked about in the MAC preview with Bowling Green, right? They've had a little bit of marginal incremental improvement, but this is certainly a year they have to make a bowl game. And just based on how the math lines up with who they play in conference play, I think it at plus 1,600, which is what I bet it at. It's worth taking a small position on them to win the conference, and then if they get to the conference championship game, you can find out what you need to do if you want to let it ride or whatever to make it profitable for you.
Yeah, two things that you hit on there that we've said already. Here, I think, again, the third year of Norvell with a lot of turmoil all over, I think that will serve them well. And the other point, and we've said this in a lot of cases, the path looks easy. Going back to, we are really looking at the Chernobyl situation where we could have 5 teams tied for first because that stupid 7 game. There are a lot of easy paths there. So yeah, I'm thinking, do I even want to bet anybody on Mountain West champs just because I might get eased out by some dumb tiebreaker? What's the 5-team tiebreaker in this conference? I don't know. This is going to be one of the dumb stories of this year. It's got to be. Yeah. So, Robert, you somehow Duck is more bullish than I am on the Rams. I like them, but I don't know. Where do you stand between us?
I guess I get to break the tie,
Sure.
and I will join with Step on a Duck here. The thing is, you're getting outvoted here. No, quick note about the Colorado State-Colorado game. The reason that game had so much, because the thing is, I remember that game. I remember it vividly because so many people on Twitter were talking about it, and not even just college football people, but like NFL people were like, "Why is this? This is insane. What is happening right now?" And it was a combination of that 2 week Colorado sugar high where they beat TCU, the team that had gone to the national championship, the national semifinalists the year before. Then they took down Nebraska because Jeff Sim decided to change teams for that game. And then they play off against Colorado State, and they were massive favorites. And people like Shedeur Sanders. Like, again, the thing is, people were systematically overestimating TCU and Nebraska that year, more so TCU. But they're like, hey, this Colorado team could be one of the top teams in the country. And then all of a sudden they play this Colorado State team, a team people thought would assume were going to be horrible, but they were actually pretty competitive with. They were, I think, 21, actually, it says it here, I have it here, 23-point favorites against Colorado State. And they could not put them away. And it went into, I think, triple overtime, I think? And then they eventually won, no, double overtime, sorry, double overtime. They won 43-35 because they stopped them from scoring a touchdown. But that game was crazy. And it was just, again, it was a Pac-12 after dark game. One of the last ones. There was still the rest of the season, but probably one of the most lasting one. And it was like that huge, just a mix of factors that caused that game to be iconic. And we're going to lose a little bit of that with the Pac-12 no longer existing. But we'll get more. There will probably be eventually Big 12 after dark, so we'll see it again. But no, like that was an iconic game for that reason. But no, again, this team, again, a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde as well, similar to Air Force in that case, right? You take Colorado, which Colorado, okay, not a good team, but still a better team than any team in the Mountain West probably, right? You take them to the brink. You beat Boise State, the somehow conference champions. Beat Air Force. You lose to Air Force, but that was when they were good. So they lost to good Air Force, but also not by that much, only by 17, which isn't horrible. And then they lose to Wyoming and Hawaii, but they beat San Diego State and Nevada. So this is a team it's trying, like, it's building. You can see that build, right? The 3-9 first season, 5-7 second season. They're getting better. They're improving. But they just haven't been able to break through yet. And I think that the signs we saw in some of those games, specifically against Colorado, they're getting closer. They're getting closer to it, and I think they might be able to pull it off this year. I think a bowl game is definitely within reach, and 12-1 for Mountain West is a little high. I would rather that have a 2 in front of it for me to bet that, like a 20-1, 25-1. But it's definitely a team I'm going to watch out for. Again, this is a team that I think will be competitive down the stretch. Again, because there's going to be some insane tiebreakers. I'm not touching this, but I think there's going to be a couple of teams competitive, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Colorado State being one of those teams.
Yeah, interesting scheduling spot too. And I always look at motivation and some circumstance from a week to week betting standpoint. And while we've talked about a lot of the positives with Colorado State, that game after Colorado,
Yep.
whether they win or lose,
Bingo.
if they beat Colorado, everyone's going to be patting them on the back.
Yep.
They're going to be celebrating for several days. Sneaky UTEP comes into town,
Yep.
and UTEP will be catching 20, and I'll be on the Miners if that's the case. Or if they lose another close one against Colorado, does Colorado beat them twice and cause them to beat them the next week too with UTEP coming in there? So that could be a tricky spot for the Rams is when they host UTEP.
Either way, it's going to be very hard to focus on that game. And you've got Cade McConnell and you've got whatever Scotty Walden's going to do there with 17 guys from Stephen F. Austin or Austin P, whichever Austin he came. Austin P. That's going to be like preparing for a left-handed boxer that you really don't even think of, who's like slightly overweight and out of shape, but can just pummel you. I was thinking the same thing. It's amazing that you said that. All right.
Three sharp guys on the show. That's why.
Yes. Yeah. Go to the next team here. So this is not my first victory lap of the season, but I sniffed this out. This was in episode 1 when we were going over the quarterback transfers. And I was just saying, look, what is Blake Anderson doing bringing in Spencer Petras? It's like he wants to get fired at this point. I didn't quite get it right. I think what he actually was doing was saying he was supposedly in trouble for his job, but now he's been let go. I think he did that protectively. He said, you know what? You think you're going to fire me? Well, try coaching with this guy at quarterback, okay? Good luck with that. I think that was like a protective move. Spencer Petras, 68 lifetime apex. Who knows how much of that is Iowa? Who knows how much of that is Spencer Petras? I'm not going to...
Don't want to find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. This Nate Dreiling guy, basically, okay, I can't crap on him. He was the DC for our guy Jerry Kill at New Mexico State. But man, he has a light resume. Like, when Kill hired him to be the defensive coordinator, I thought, this is a bit of a stretch to be the defensive coordinator at a Conference USA. Now he's the head coach at a Mountain West program with Spencer Petras at quarterback. Uh-oh. All right, you do have a good offensive line that's experienced at least. You have, and Duck is probably way more familiar with this guy than I, this Jalen Royals guy, 21st in FBS in Ryan. So he's a player, second in the whole conference. Interesting, too, with Dreiling coming in as head coach, you have a starting defensive tackle, you have a starting cornerback, you have a starting safety that all transferred in from New Mexico State. So maybe there's some proof of concept there. I don't think they're going to be very good. My check is the first 3 games are just, you can't see anything. Robert Morris, they'll probably have their way with. USC and Utah, enjoy that. That game at Temple, that's not, I think, the most fun trip, going from flying out of Salt Lake and going into Philadelphia and going to the whatever Temple plays at. I'm interested to see what happens there. I think that's really just going to tell us what exactly this team is. I don't think they're good. Temple's horrible. Maybe they struggle with Temple. I don't have a lot other than an inexperienced coach, and Spencer Petras could make for some high comedy and a really upset good receiver in Mr. Royals too. There could be some upset talent. This sneakily might be like the kind of comic relief that we're missing without Brady Hoke this season. And I hate to say this about a guy that coached under Jerry Kill. So I've got hopes with some mixed feelings on this in terms of just a bad situation that could turn funny. What about you, Robert?
Again, when you look at Spencer Petras, that's not, oh man, I feel confident here. That's not great. I'm not like, we got this, guys. No, New Mexico State DC sounds good, but that is a team that definitely did not win because of their defense. It was a team that won because they put up more points generally. It was a good team, but again, and actually they did shut down Auburn, hilariously enough. But again, outside of that, it was a team mostly winning through offense, though. But again, could be a good coach here too. But again, this team has not looked particularly good. It's been decidedly mediocre. Basically, they had one good year in 21, and then since then, a couple 6 and 7 years in the Mountain West. That's decidedly mediocre. You now have a decidedly mediocre quarterback in Spencer Petras. Even okay offensive line, maybe. But again, this is a team that's going to win some games, lose some games. That 5 line seems exactly right to me. I'm not. This isn't particularly inspiring to me. Give it some time. Maybe you can. This guy can do something in longer term when he's not in term again. Because this is another one where we have again, Blake Anderson again, the coach named here in Phil Steele. So this is a coaching change that's again happened in the last month. So how much runway do you have there? And to fix this, right? Because again, we said before, okay, it's still the old Fresno's coach's team for the first couple of games. It's still Blake Anderson's team for the first couple of games here. You're not going to have time to fix a lot of these problems. You definitely can't fix the Spencer Petras problem with a month left to go before the season. So this is where I'm definitely out on this team for now. I think the 5 line is exactly right, and we'll see what they can do down the stretch.
Yeah, I guess I'll throw it to you, Duck, on this. Is it necessarily a good thing that this is still Blake Anderson's team?
The fact that they didn't have a mass exodus of players transfer out after he was fired is good to show that the team has unity and belief in what they're trying to do. Uh, I don't like the quarterback position, right? I think that
What?
it's
Come on, be fair.
you're grasping at straws with Petras, and they've got Bryson Barnes in from Utah too. So Petras may not even
Oh,
have solidified himself as the number one. So
oh
we'll
my
kind of
God.
see on that.
Jeez, I didn't even notice that. That is horrible. The pig farmer.
Yes,
Yeah.
and they do have some explosiveness at the skill guys. They've got a solid one-two punch at running back with Rajul Faison and Robert Briggs. Receiver you mentioned Royals is extremely explosive. The problem is Micah Davis left after the firing, and so I think you're going to see teams kind of star and focus in on Royals, and so I don't know how he'll be a factor, but I don't know if he would be as big of a factor because Micah Davis is gone, so that's going to inhibit at least what they want to do on offense a little bit. Defensively, I think they could be okay.
Hmm.
I think they're good against the pass, and I think that could help them. Although the league is not exceptionally strong passing outside of maybe two teams, but I don't know. I don't personally like the schedule that much to really make a play on the regular season win. You talk about Robert Morris, who they'll blast, and then they're at USC and they host Utah. I think they'll beat Temple. I'm way down on Temple in the American. I have a strong position on Temple under 2.5 regular season wins. I have Temple as a 10-point dog or greater in every game other than one. I would expect they start 2-2 with a win against Temple, but then if you look at the rest of the slate, at Boise, they host UNLV. I can't imagine they would win either of those games. At Wyoming is tough. At Washington State is tough. Hawaii and San Diego State are coin flips, but we've already talked about those two teams who I think are better than Utah State. And then at Colorado State, who knows what Colorado State will be playing for at that point. So hard for me to make a real strong position either way, but I think 5-7 is a lot more likely than 6-6. So I would probably lean under. The one particular schedule spot that I would say could be interesting for Utah State if they find any continuity at the quarterback position and if they can find another option at receiver. In game 3, they're hosting Utah, and they're probably going to be catching about 24, 25 points in this Battle of the Brothers. This is not the rivalry game Utah cares about, right? Utah cares about the Holy War against BYU, which will happen later on in the year. From a scheduling perspective, Utah hosts Baylor, and then the week after, they're at Oklahoma State. And then you've got this slippy trip at Logan. And I just don't know what Utah is going to really think about how their preparation is for this game. And again, it's a rivalry to Utah State, but it's really not to Utah. And so I'll be interested to see the line on that one. But that could be a spot where Utah State could throw a punch early and keep that one closer than 24, 25 points.
Wow, I cannot go with you there. I think Utah's going to look at the quarterback position and just laugh. This has an outside shot, and we might be the only three on the planet that can just appreciate the absurdity of this. This could be the Mountain West Conference version of 2022 Western Michigan quarterback bad, where you had Jack Salapak and one of the Bourget brothers just making a mess week after week. Bryson Barnes, You've made my Mountain West Conference season with that information. I don't know how I missed that. Petras isn't doing good. Let's bring in the backup. Who is he? Oh, You just wait. You just wait till you see this guy.
Likely not a lot to draw from, especially
you're,
if it could head south early.
you're so much more of a gentleman than I am. Yeah. All right. The New Mexico Lobos, Bronco Mendenhall. This boy, he does some weird things in his career. He just leaves BYU to go to Virginia, unexpectedly just says, "Yeah, I'm done," and now he shows up in New Mexico. His offensive coordinator is Jason Beck, I guess because he really wanted to have his offense being run by a guy who got Dino Bainers fired in just one season. Congratulations. I like Mendenhall, but just do not be deceived by these relatively impressive offensive power rankings. Just a reminder that was all Brian Vincent and the kid from UAB. What's his name? The quarterback that played for him at UAB. And then he went to Mexico. All right. Nobody remembers, but I'm talking about like
Dylan
there you go,
Hopkins.
Dylan Hopkins. Thank you.
And really, a lot of the offensive explosion was Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who went to Arizona. That guy's a real dude at running back.
Thank you. So
Gone.
it's Devin Dampier has 64 career pass attempts, and he's got a new offensive coordinator. So I'm not really buying the 135 apex. Offensive line was cleaned out. The defensive coordinator is Nick Howell. He's been under Mendenhall for 14 seasons. I got the picture of Pete Carroll here because when USC played BYU in 2003, I think that was Mendenhall's first season as the head coach at BYU, if that sounds right. And in the post-game interview, USC, they had a tough time for about a half. And it was funny. One of the first things he said was, I got to look at the film. This Mendenhall guy's doing some really weird things on defense. I don't know what he's doing, but I got to figure this out. So I really respect him as a defensive mind. It's tough. He's got a long way to go. He literally is taking over, by my ratings, the worst defense in all of FBS, which is a mouthful because there are some bad defenses, and boy, that's just a lot. That week 0 game against Montana State might be my sneaky favorite. I think that's actually on FS1. I just looked that up today. That'll be interesting. And are they the Grizzlies or whatever they are? They're a 10.5 point favorite. The Lobos are catching 10.5 to an FCS team at home. They avoid Nevada in Mountain West Conference play, which is rough because I think Nevada is about the only other really team that's about this bad. I think they're dogs in all 12 games pretty easily. I don't really see how they're going to be even close within a field goal of anybody on that schedule. If there's two things that we've established I have weaknesses for, it's Kirkland vodka on a Friday or Saturday and betting against first-year coaches in a situation like this. I think that totals up to 2.5 in some places. I'm really tempted to bet the under in that. I can't see him being favored, but going against Mendenhall scares me a little bit. That's the only thing, but I think it's still a slow build here. What do you think,
Yeah,
Robert?
I can't see this taking off particularly fast. I don't see it. I think at a certain point this could be good, but right now, no. I think this is going to take a while. You have some kid 64 career pass attempts, high apex on those pass attempts, but that's 2 games combined and one start, some relief somewhere, right? That's not a lot. A couple of relief appearances. I'm not taking that to the bank. Offensive line, that's a problem here too. Defense, not great either. That's all the red flags of this is a problem, right? This could be a good team. This could be a potentially half decent / good team next year, but not this year, right? You give them a year to rebuild. Okay, we can do something with this. But I'm really struggling to see what you piece together here. You lose half of your Ryan. Again, not these are not good numbers. Again, this will be a fun team. This team will probably be really bad, and then down the stretch they might do some stuff. Watch out for them against Wyoming or San Diego State or something. But this will be that team that is down. Again, this will be the team that's going to be like 17.5 point dog somewhere, and then they win. But that's not happening until week 10. Keep that in mind when betting this team.
I'd say maybe week 10 of next year. This is a big rebuild, but yeah. I know Montana State is good, but if you're a 10.5 point dog to them, boy, I can't. What the one game when I throw it to you on this, Duck? Who would you have favored in them against New Mexico State at New Mexico State?
I would have the Aggies favored by 2.5.
Yeah, that sounds about right. You see them as dogs. Other than that, they're going to be dogs of like probably 7+ in each the rest of the games.
Yeah, I have them as dogs of 10 plus.
Yeah.
in every other game except that New Mexico State game. And I think
Even Utah State?
it's a full rebuild. There's a few things to, but not enough, right? And I think that you're relying on a full offensive rebuild. You're relying on 5 transfers on the offensive line that are going to have to gel and play with continuity, which is hard to do, right? It's hard to do it if you have 5 guys returning, let alone 5 transfers from 5 different places to come in and gel. Um, the running back room will not be as explosive without Krosky Merritt, excuse me, who went to Arizona. They do bring in Eli Sanders, who played at Iowa State and actually saw the field, so it could be serviceable. And Dampier did show some flashes last year when he did receive action, so I think that there's something to build on. They've got a great receiver as well, Luke Wysong, who can be okay, right? It's something to build on, but I just don't see this team being really a team that has a lot of spots where they can rack up any real wins. Something you don't see very often, but their regular season win total opened at 1.5, and that's as low as you'll ever
Yeah.
see at the FBS level. 1.5s just don't get thrown around that, and that's where the state of the program is. Right there's a long
Yeah.
way with them in Nevada. There's a long look up to the next team, and you're going to be little brother for a while. But Mendenhall clearly knows what he's in for with this rebuild. He didn't have to take the job. He was comfortably on hiatus, and he wanted to be here. And so I think that yeah, I could see them turning the corner in year 3, but this year is going to be really hard to draw from. Now, I will say that I'll bet any team at the right number. And so there will be some points in time where the number is just going to be too high. That could be this upcoming 5 days from now when they're hosting Montana State. You've never had an FCS be this large of a favorite against an F. The last closest time that this happened was 10 years ago. JMU was -9 at East Carolina, and they ended up winning, which doesn't impact this game, but they did cover that number. The line is just ballooning, and I think Montana State, I could get into them and how good they are in FCS, but it's just rare air to see an FCS foe this big of a road favorite against FBS competition. So much so that I'm not sure Montana State can't hang around and make this particular situation a game. We talked about another spot on the schedule, but Air Force plays Navy, and then they immediately go at New Mexico. New Mexico's off a bye after New Mexico State, and then they host Air Force. Circle that one as just one to sniff around on, try and find a good line. But that's one of those ATS spots where New Mexico could catch a team trying to exhale, and it might catch Air Force. When you're talking about betting against the number and getting enough points, New Mexico, they getting a big enough number, they were okay last year, right? They were 6-6 against the number last year, which is not great, not super profitable, but they hung with Boise for a while and they beat Fresno State as 23-point underdogs. If the number's right, there could be a case to play New Mexico on a week to week basis in certain spots, but not going over the win total and not foreseeing this team to even sniff bowl eligibility. And I'd need 3,000 to 1 to win the conference to even make a ham sandwich play on them because it's just not happening this year for them.
Yeah, it's the other thing about that Air Force game, which is interesting. Number one, obviously Mendenhall's a really good defensive mind, and I think he has some familiarity because when he was at BYU for a while, he was in the Mountain West, so it's not like he has to learn how to defend that. He's done that a few times, I think, in his career. Does that sound right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that might be
Yeah, they were in the Mountain West at that time.
yeah, might be the sneaky spot that really shocks people that I don't think they'll win, but they can make it a game. Or that might be the one time when Air Force really decides, hey, let's play dumb football this one time this season. One to keep an eye on for sure. All right, the other team that's looking way up. I like these guys even less and a lot less than New Mexico. Choate, I think he did a really good job at Montana State. He was the co-DC at Texas last season. Matt Lubick, your mileage may vary on what you think of him. I think that his success at Oregon was probably not a lot of him based on Nebraska's kind of lack of awesome offensive play when he was the offensive coordinator at Nebraska. Plus, he's got Brendan Lewis to work with. 47 apex in his basically his second season as a starter, which is not great, especially when you came out of the gate with a 51 at Colorado. Now, these were not the most functional situations in the world, but Jesus, you're starting from way behind with those 2 seasons under your belt. Only ULM, literally, who's completely starting all over, starts with less Ryan than this team in all of FBS. I'm not sure you say if it's Kane or Ione is the DC. He was the DC under Choate at Montana State, so that's probably good for the long term. The problem is, in the near term, this group stunk defensively. They were red in all four categories. Only three teams can have that distinction last year. Like I said just prior, now they avoid New Mexico, which would be probably one of their more winnable games. They face all top five of the Mountain West Conference teams if you're going by the DraftKings preseason odds, which is a tough draw. Really, the counterpoint to we have a lot of teams that have the easy path. Boy, they got one of the rougher paths by virtue of that draw. I have them as dogs in 11 games. That Eastern Washington is better than me, Duck. They're like a whatever FCS team. I think they're actually below 500 in conference play last year, so they're not one of your better teams there. But somehow it's at Eastern Washington. Not a good job scheduling there.
No, they host Eastern Washington.
Okay, and I screw up these things a lot too. I do 130 of them. The schedules are like the biggest casualty. I'm not a production line. I'm one guy stuck in my office. Don't have my Chihuahua with me today. So again, starting from ground zero here, I have a weakness for this kind of situation. I'm probably going to play the under here. They have 13 games. I think they're the only team that's 13 games this season, but
yes,
I don't see them winning more than two. Do you see a third win on here, Doc?
Not only do I not see a third win,
yes,
you could make a case that they don't really have
no,
even more than one win.
yeah,
I think I've got them as at least 10-point underdogs, so decided underdogs in 12. Eastern Washington will probably be a coin flip. I could see based on Eastern Washington is not what they were, right? We think of Eric Barrier and some of the high flying Vernon Adams and some
yeah.
of the high flying Eastern Washington. That's not this Eastern Washington. They do play on the red field up in Cheney, Washington, but this is a far cry from. This is a program that struggles with funding, and they're a far cry from what you think of when you think of an FCS power. They're a mediocre Big Sky team, and there's probably going to be a field goal game either way lined with Nevada. And outside of that, I've got lines of 28, 17, 5, 22, 16, 18, 20, 29. The lines are just so huge, and the gap is just with this program is just they've fallen very quickly. And they brought in Chuba Purdy from Nebraska to try to win the job, and he's having an MRI tomorrow. He may not play all year. They don't know what the problem is. He was hurt in practice yesterday, and he may not even win the job. And so it's going to be back to Brendan Lewis.
To be
And I don't
clear,
know. Outside of their running back room, I don't have a lot to like on offense.
this is the Chippa Purdy that couldn't beat out Jeff Sims at the beginning of last season either. Just for context, right?
Grasping at straws, I think. We've talked about some BS or FC group of five journeymen, and Chuba Purdy's not good.
Yeah. When I was doing my win probabilities for each game on here, all 13 of them, the only thing that really scared me was, all right, I could really regret just backing Clay Helton in to some degree here by fading Nevada here, but I don't know. I'll underwrite that risk. Yeah.
A thing to look at is you've got an under 2.5 at 110. So you're going to have to win 3 games in order to get
Yeah.
over that. If you were to just try and find some sort of combination that would unlock 3 wins, and you would just stack that as a money line parlay where you would take them on the money line against Eastern Washington,
Yeah.
and then just your next 2 shortest dog spots where you roll that over into a money line, let's say hosting Colorado State or Georgia Southern, and then hosting Air Force or whatever the 3 shortest spots are. For them to win all 3 of those as either a really short fave or 7 to 9 point dogs, you're getting it's 22 to 1.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. That is yeah. Literally. And that's like the best path, right?
That's like the easiest path of least resistance. Sure, is there a theory out there where they could win a game as 17, 18-point underdogs? There's a theory when they line up in the first quarter, but when you get punched in the mouth, the plan goes away.
Yeah.
So I just think that there's just not enough competitive football games for them to play this year because they're just so far behind. I would power rate them worse than New Mexico. And even with 13 games, the regular season win total, normally when you have 13 games on the slate, you'll never see something less than 4.5. It's 2.5 for a reason.
Yeah. That is a good point. If you were going to play the over here, I would just find like the 5 or 6 or 8 most likely paths and just do almost like a round robin of parlays, whatever you want to say, and you'd still come out way ahead and just betting the over. Because it's not like
You would.
going to reach up and beat Minnesota as win number 3, right? Not that Minnesota's great, but Minnesota's going to push these guys around. Minnesota might not have to throw the ball.
Yeah, I don't think that they'll have a lot of success at Minnesota, and you're exactly right. Minnesota might throw 8 passes in that game.
Yeah, you say things much more kindly than me. The other thing too, and I'll throw this to you, Robert. Now that we've untangled this conference and I have a better kind of feel for unstacking this, they might have the toughest conference schedule in the entire Mountain West. Yeah, Boise and UNLV and Air Force and Colorado State and Hawaii and Fresno State. That's 6 of your 7. Good luck. That, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
This could get really bleak. What do you think, Robert?
No, I 100% agree. Well, I'll talk about Nevada in a second. I just want to go back to the offensive coordinator hire. Matt Lubbock, he was the offensive coordinator under Scott Frost. Who thought that was a good idea? Who was like, so the 20 to 21 season, was that the COVID? That was the COVID season, right?
20 was, yeah. Oh,
yeah, so he was only the head
coach. That Nebraska was unlucky and played stupid football. You remember that one season?
Yeah, that was. Yeah, I think that was all of the season. But who? Okay, was he just was he offensive coordinator for just 1 year or 2 years? Because I think
2 years.
2 years. Yeah. So they went 3-5 and 3-9. Success. That was their 3 wins in 21. The non-COVID shortened seasons was Fordham, Buffalo, and Northwestern. That's it. So that's not particularly great. Who looks at that and says, that's our guy, right? That's really concerning. Again, this team has not been good for several years here. Even then, they were mediocre at best. They had one good year, and then they went to a bowl game and lost that bowl game to a MAC team. So again, setting expectations here of what a good season for Nevada is. Again, no, this team was probably one of the worst teams in the Mountain West last year. Their non-conference schedule is not helping them at all. Again, yeah, there's a reason why the over-under is 2.5. Again, Texas co-defensive coordinator, basically co-DC, Montana State head coach. It's not the worst. But again, this is going to be a long rebuild here. This is going to be, we're a couple of years out. And then just, again, there's nothing at quarterback. That's a worse quarterback than, that's a worse apex for quarterback than Spencer Petras, right? Again, context here. This is even worse than that one we said was bad. That's the context here.
It is such a shame that they don't play New Mexico. That would just be an amazing quarterback battle.
Yeah, put that one on big CBS.
yeah.
Another thing in the weeds, but
yeah.
So there's 3 phases of football, and Nevada loses their all-time leading kick returner, their all-time leading kicker, and their starting punter from last year. So even special teams is going to be an uphill battle. So when you're talking about a team that's trying to cover a big number, and you're unproven at kicker, how oftentimes does a punter shank one and then the opposing team has a short field and they punch one in and they blow the... There's so many bad things that could happen with trying to bet on this team against the number that I don't see a lot of spots. Like, I would need 30 points when they host Oregon State.
Yeah.
I would need 30 points at Minnesota minimum. I would need so many points. Yeah. SMU, that's just not even, throw in the towel, man. Like Apollo Creed versus Ivan Drago, throw the towel in. It's going to be really bad on Saturday when they host SMU.
Now that's actually how I get my win expectancies. I basically do a money line. I say, all right, if I wanted to bet both sides on this game, what's my money line? I go by the win percentage. I think the average of the two, and that's my win percentage of the game. When I did Nevada, it's just I couldn't even. It would be like most of these games. I wouldn't. I would need like literally 90-1 just to play $10. It's not an exaggeration. They're in a bad spot. Thank you for reminding me. Special teams. I made a very smart bet on Kansas at Nevada, and it was absolutely the right side. And it was basically special teams that had them covering that game. They were so thoroughly outplayed. They were outgained by like more than 2-1. It was just nuts. That was so frustrating. So thanks for bringing that memory up. I appreciate that. The thing, Robert, your question when you said, who looks at Matt Lubbock and says, oh, that's my guy? I'll tell you who. It's the person who makes the budget. That's the problem here. And with that, We move on. I sneakily don't hate this team. Ken Niumataloto, he got his divorce and he got his new haircut and he's been at the gym and he's going to show off his new offense. He got the Texas State passing game coordinator from last year, so no more triple option for Ken. Interestingly, he got quarterback Emmett Brown from Washington State. Now Stutzman was the quarterback coach at Washington State, so he wouldn't have played for him, but I'm thinking that Stutzman probably recruited this guy to Washington State, so he's probably familiar with him. They do have a really nice receiver, Nick Nash, third in the Mountain West in Ryan last season. The offensive line was cleaned out, probably just as well with the new offensive scheme. We saw that didn't really hurt our guy GJ Kinney at Texas State last season. They retained the DC from the prior staff. Derek Odom has actually been pretty good. The defense loses a lot. They only have 36 returning starts, which is very low, but it's a year one, so fine. Schedule is not great. They face the top three teams in the conference, Boise, UNLV, and Fresno. Two key games for me is the game versus Kennesaw State and then against Nevada. We've really done a great job crapping on both of those teams. I want to see not too many struggles here in year one just to get some belief in the Stutzman Brown Nash offense. I don't like them enough to bet the over 4.5. Maybe I almost just want as a $5 conversation piece, but it's not smart money. There's enough here for me to be interested in more than I thought when I got in. I just thought Kenny running a new offense is going to really look bad, but I'm interested what offensively it's going to be like, defensively, whatever. But these pieces look like they might work quicker than people expect. What do you think, Doc?
I took an under position. I think the transition is going to be tougher. I think people, a couple things. Ken Niumatalolo could work out long term. I think a lot of people just associate him with Navy and being an East Coast guy, but he spent a lot of his career on the West Coast and at Hawaii as well. So he will certainly resonate with West Coast people. And there are a lot of Polynesian players, and he'll be able to recruit that sort of dynamic. Hard to replace Chevin Cordero, right? He was the Mount West Player of the Year. He was a great quarterback. He really carried the team at times. They lose a couple of productive running backs. Everyone in the receiver room is gone except for Nick Nash, who's probably their best receiver. Probably was last year too, but certainly this year, really solid receiver. Converted quarterback who's now playing receiver. A lot of the schemes are different though, so the offensive line is going to take some time to figure that out. Right there, you'd think Ken Niumatalolo running the triple option, but not doing it here. They're going to do some air raid principles. They're going to call it the spread and shred. So we'll see how that goes. I just think that there are so many losses on both sides of the ball from a team that really got hot at the end of last year after starting 1-5. They won their last 6 games to not make a bowl game, which they did not win against Coastal Carolina. But I don't know. I took a position here that I think the schedules outside of Kennesaw State and Nevada, it's a tough slate, right? I think you look at they play Wazoo and Oregon State on the road. They end the year hosting Stanford, who people are mixed feelings on Stanford, but I don't know necessarily that they beat Stanford. Wyoming's tough. Colorado State's tough. At Fresno is tough. At Air Force could be one where I've got them as about a 5 or 6 point underdog. I've got 3 wins on the slate, and I just don't see this being one of those bowl type seasons. I think the bowl streak ends for San Jose State. I think it's a rebuilding year. I think it's one of those years where Niumatalolo will do with what he has the best he can, but it's a tough conference slate. They play 3 Pac-12 teams, or I should say, I should rephrase that now. They play 3 former Pac-12s in Washington State, Oregon State, and Stanford. And I don't know where the wins come this year for San Jose State. I know where one of the wins is going to come, though, and that'll be on September 14th.
Yes. What, you have questions about the game against Nevada, by the way? Really?
Likely not. No,
Okay.
that's one of the. I've got 3 wins that I've
Yeah.
got for them. That one, and then there's a Kennesaw State game too.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. All right. You might have talked me off my conversation piece. I think, yeah, in a league conference that's got so much upheaval, I see a little more just like pieces that make sense together, just between the OC and the quarterback, and he has at least one receiver to work with, where a lot of them are just like, all right, pardon our mess. Robert, break the tie here. What are you on the Spartans?
I'm going. I'm low on them. I think 4.5 is just a little too low for me to take an over under position on that. But and again, you've got some teams that I don't think are particularly great. You've got Sacramento State, Kennesaw State. It's not the it's not a murder's row there exactly. You might be able to get a couple easy wins that way, and you cheat out a win somewhere else, then you're looking at that 4.5, 5, right? I do agree on the missing the bowl. I do that call. But again, I think this team is due for a full rebuilding year. They did win the Mountain West in that COVID year. They've declined slash stagnated the last three. I think this team is about 50-50 to make a bowl, which they've basically been the last couple of years. Again, for some of these guys, and again, this is yet another example. P5 quarterback recruited, didn't do anything at P5 level. Now, it's P4 level now, but same point. Now down to the Mountain West, right? This is a consistent theme, and again, like we're like, oh, okay, this guy was recruited by USC. Well, now we're like, this guy was recruited by Washington State, right? Those are not the same, right? There's talent differences there, right? So I'm a bit lower on this team this year. I don't think this team is going to be. This team, I think, is going to be a bit iffy. Again, this team was somehow involved in a three-way tie to get into the Mountain West Championship game last year. This, I don't think they'll get there this year, but I could be wrong. But I don't think they would be.
Yeah, very, very different team last season. So, all right, you might talk me off my conversation piece bet here.
One interesting thing too about the conversation piece we talked about earlier, those Mountain West tiebreakers. Jose beat UNLV in the last game of the season, and UNLV still went to the title game.
Yeah, I think because I crossed off Boise because I think I did the math and was like, well, these teams are just going to play again. But yeah, I don't know. Can I blame the playoff committee for that? Just please. All right, Wyoming. Not sure what to make it here. First season under Jay Sauvel, Craig Bowl. Great career. Has retired. Jay Sauvel, don't know if you guys know this. He graduated from Mount Union. There is a current, you probably know this, current head coach and a current defensive position coach that also played at Mount Union. Not on the same teams as Mr. Sauvel. You not know who the head coach is, at least, Duck. Do you know who the position coach is? If you tell us who the head coach is,
I do not, but
okay.
it's interesting nugget.
So it was the head coach is Matt Campbell, and actually his teammate on Mount Union was defensive lineman Alex Grinch, believe it or not.
Oh,
So you've got really a sneaky, kind of weird cradle of defensive coaches of varying success, let's say. We include Mr. Grinch in there. Looks like Evan Svoboda is the quarterback. He looks like a typical Wyoming quarterback, which is not good. Let's not forget Josh Allen. He had horrible numbers at Wyoming. His numbers were just horrible. They have an experienced offensive line, but they were not great running. There were 66 in FBS and running. So I think, again, they're going to struggle with an offensive identity other than a lot of punts. I can see the defense projecting is probably the best in the Mountain West. The power rating, I think, was second defensively, and then they returned a lot of starts and very experienced here. Can't really play them on the season win totals. I think that they're just still stuck in a bit of a traffic jam that I can't untangle. But I do know that this is not going to be a fun team to play. This is going to sound horrible. A kind of slightly more talented Mountain West version of Eastern Michigan, he said, and cringed. So I don't know. Is that a fair characterization, Doc?
yeah. When I was doing my notes on Wyoming, this seems to be the team that has the highest amount of variance
Mm,
in what they could possibly be, right? Evan Svoboda, built like Josh Allen, not sure he's going to develop into that. I definitely think it's a step back from Andrew Peasley. Running back room should be okay. So Harrison Whaley is a really solid running back. He got hurt in practice, though, and he's been held out of practice for a while. So I don't really know if that's a long term lingering thing with him. I'm going to have to check the reports on Harrison Whaley because they really need him in order to do what they want to do on offense. I like the fact that with Wyoming, you know what you're going to get, and their identity is what their identity is. And I don't think they're going to deviate too terribly much from what you've known
yeah.
Wyoming to be, right? And I think they're going to hang their hat on defense and special teams, and they're really comfortable in low scoring games. And the interesting thing about the schedule is I could see them 0-3 in those first three games. It's
Yeah.
really hard to really see. They're only 6.5 point dogs at Arizona State's a mess. It's going to be a low scoring game that both teams will have a chance to win. So I certainly think they'll be in that one. BYU is also down, so that's another game that they could feasibly win. And when you get into conference play, it's just what we got here. We've got Boise, Colorado State. It's pretty much it from the contenders. There's a path to them winning some games here, but I don't see Wyoming really threatening to win 9 or 10 games.
Yeah.
Certainly not 9 like they did last year, but I think there's enough there to where they'll be competitive and potentially dangerous so long as they get decent quarterback play. The hard thing with measuring Wyoming is they're not overly explosive in the pass
Yeah.
game, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their pass game is bad. They do use a lot of two tight end sets. They actually use a lot of two tight end, two running back sets where they'll only have one receiver on the field at a time. And so that is when you're playing power football and you're play actioning off of the wide zone, off the left tackle, off the right tackle, and you're play actioning off of that, and you have a lot of tight end crossing routes. You don't have to be overly explosive to still be effective. And that's what we saw from Wyoming last year, right? Methodical drives and a lot of time possessing the football and a lot of games where the scores were close and
Yep.
they just rely on their strengths late in the fourth quarter. So I would suspect that's what we're going to see. Defense should be rock solid once again. So yeah, I don't have a lot that I hate. I just don't have a lot that I love. And I would not be excited about that trip to North Texas. I can tell you that much.
True. As you walk through that, it made me realize why there's no way I could play the season totals on this team. Even though we know what we know what they are makes them unbettable in this regard because they're very solid defensively. I'd say they're limited offensively. They're going to play a lot of low scoring, close games, as you just said, and you have shaky quarterback play. You're going to have a lot of games where I didn't even go through it with them, but I'm sure that a vast majority of their schedule would have win probabilities between 40 and 60%. There's so many coin flips there. You're basically flipping a coin at minus 130 unless you're taking the over. It just doesn't make sense. I don't know. Robert.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
to your point, I have it written down here when I was going through the schedule. I could see them starting 6-3 and losing their last three, and I could see them starting 3-6 and winning their last three.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of paths to any. It just it's nothing would surprise me. Literally, there's no game where any outcome would surprise me. Not
Yeah,
one.
and I have every game on the schedule, every single
Yeah,
one priced within 8.
yeah, exactly. And what are you gonna do with that? So everything's basically win probability between 40 and 60. Literally, yeah.
Yes.
All right, so Robert, tell us where we're wrong here on this. You've got a strong opinion on this one.
Not a insanely strong opinion. Again, I think I guess it could go either way, right? This could be an 8-4 team. This could be a 4-8 team. But the 6.5 seems right. I think this is fundamentally just going to become like a 6-6 team. This is a rebuilding year for this team. This team is losing the former head coach Craig Bull. That obviously is not great. That's really bad for the team. He was a coach there for a very long time, right? So you're starting over. It's going to be a learning curve. The quarterback, that's really concerning. 38 apex, one start. Nah, we're going to need some improvement there. But again, it's going to be a rebuilding process. He's going to need to make the team his own. It's going to take a while. Could this team have a good, like an outsized good or bad year? Possibly, but I think fundamentally, like that 6 line, I think that's exactly where this is. I think the 6.5 under minus 130, so that's basically saying 6-6. I think that's fundamentally where this team is.
Yeah, one thing I want to look up here. Let's see if I can figure this out real quick. His one start was against. Do either of you guys have this where he actually started? Oh, at Texas. Okay, I could forgive that. That's a tough spot at Texas too. All right, it's not like he was struggling against New Mexico, for example. All right, we can forgive that.
Fair.
Yeah. Okay.
One
Yes.
one scheduling tidbit of note for Wyoming. They have a tendency to play around with their food when it comes to FCS competition. So if you just go back in recent history, in 2019 they were minus 25 hosting Idaho. They won 25-16, did not cover. In 21, they hosted Montana State. They were minus 19. They won the game 19-16 and did not cover. In 2022, They hosted Northern Colorado. They were minus 24 and a half. They won the game 33-10, but it was because they scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Played around with their food, did not cover. Last year against a really bad Portland State, they were minus 28. They won the game 31-17, did not cover.
Jeez.
So they have a real tendency when playing FCS competition that they just play around with their food, right? There's no real sense of urgency to blast these teams. Again, they hang in there in close, low scoring games and rely on special teams. And so this year they play FCS Idaho, who was very good last year, and they were decimated by the transfer portal. So I won't go too far in the weeds with Idaho, but it's not the same Idaho team. If the line is 6 or 7, I'll play Wyoming. If it's 17 or 20, it's a chance to really look at an FCS dog to just linger and keep that one close.
Is Petrino still the coach there?
Yeah, I don't think he's. I don't think he left. No.
Okay. This is marriage of convenience, right? Do you want to leave? No. Do you want to still have me? Sure. Okay. He might be there
Yeah,
without a contract, right? Just all right, I'll show up.
it's open ended.
Yes, exactly. All
It's
right,
in Office Space when he doesn't really work here, but we forgot to fix the glitch, so he's still getting
exactly.
paid, but we fixed the glitch.
There you go. All right, you went to an old movie just to make me feel a little more modern. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's not often that happens. All right, I feel a lot better about this conference now, having some stuff unsorted here. So thank you for that, Duck. And with that, we go to our 3 questions of the Mountain West. This is a tough one. I'm just going to go first on this. The first current Mountain West head coach to get a Power 4 head coaching job. I'm going to go with Sean Lewis at San Diego State. I think that there's a wide open runway here, and this season's going to be rough, but with so much of the conference in turmoil and like the more established teams not looking, those guys are ready for a Power 4 job. I'm going to go with Sean Lewis. What about you, Duck?
Hard to argue that, and I think he's a rock solid coach. I just don't know if he's going to leave soon enough. I think there's been some traction already for Barry Odom, and I think if Barry Odom has a rock solid year this year, he'll be out of there and could end up back at Arkansas.
Yeah, I've heard that scenario thrown around by a couple people. All right, Robert, who do you have here?
Yeah, I do like Barry Odom. I would also say that kind of the dark horse for that would be Jay Norvell because of the name,
Mm,
right? I think you can't neglect that. That if like all of a sudden he has a good year at Colorado State, all of a sudden people are saying, well, just like Mike Norvell, right? Took a program, built it up. Colorado State lot more difficult than Florida State. Maybe he could be the same, right? So I feel like that's the kind of that or Odom. But I think Odom would be my most likely. But I don't sleep on Norvell there.
That's not a bad call, and especially because he's been all over the place. There's a lot of places that know him, and if they succeed, now I just don't know if any of those would be imminently open. It seems like all those places he's been are solid, like Texas, Oklahoma, UCLA just got a new coach. They wouldn't fire Foster that quickly. One upset in the conference does not have to be a conference game. Duck, you go first on this one.
Yeah, I had 3 interesting spots circled, but I'm gonna say
Give us the runners
based
up
on
first. Give us the runners up first before you give the official pick.
so
This is good.
the runners up were all conference games, and I had circled Air Force at New Mexico.
Okay.
Again,
As
scheduling
we
spot
discussed.
where Air Force off
Yeah.
Navy, and then New Mexico off a bye, and then that was one. And then second to last game of the season, I had circled Boise at Wyoming, and just Wyoming 6-3 of the last 9 against the number. They've had a history of playing field goal games, and certainly a spot where I may be on the Cowboys as a home dog. But series play here, Nevada struggles at Hawaii. And I'm going to say that Hawaii will beat Nevada, or I'm sorry, not Nevada, UNLV.
Okay. Wow.
UNLV struggles at Hawaii year in and year out, and I'm going to say that UNLV will lose at Hawaii November 9th.
Wow. I like that. You took a little bit of my Hawaii thunder there. I'm in. Maybe this isn't an upset based on your. Although you said anything at a field goal, so I think I'll count it. I'm going to go with Eastern Washington over hopeless and hapless Nevada. I just think that Nevada is so ripe for the picking. Yeah, just enough said on that. Who do you got here, Robert?
Give me Colorado State over Colorado.
Wow. I like it. The reverse of your Colorado over TCU pick last year, taking both sides of the hype train there. All right, Robert, you start off with who do you have in the conference title game?
Give me UNLV and UNLV and Boise.
This can't go this way. That's who I have too. We're not going to go through this whole thing
Hmm.
saying how crazy and unpredictable this conference is. And Duck, you're not going to make this unanimous, are you? To wrap up the pod?
No,
Okay.
Boise hosting Colorado State.
Whoa! Colorado State. I love it. Braden Nicolosi Fowler needs a longer name.
I did see a real cool piece that was on him and Torrey Horton, and they were both offered hundreds of thousands of dollars in NIL money to leave, and they both chose to stay. And I thought that was just a really cool piece
Yep.
on just more of the players believing in the culture and the turnaround. And some of that hoopla doesn't necessarily translate, but it had nothing to do with me and my reasoning on that. But I just thought it was another cool nugget where their players are starting to turn the corner and really believe in what he's doing.
Yeah, no, that just everything I've read about Jay Norvell is just a good guy and his players love him. And they literally came by the busloads from Nevada to follow him too. So it just speaks to him.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. That went long, but that was really good. There was a lot of information in here. Man, God bless anybody that's still listening here. Robert, we might have to chop this up into two parts just to make it a little digestible here. But Duck, thank you so much. You crushed it again. We will catch up with you at some point in the regular season. And Robert, about this time next week, we will be discussing week one.
Yep.
Yes?
Yep, we will be. It's
All
time
right.
for football.
Exactly. So thank you very much for everyone for listening / watching. And until next week, good luck. Bye-bye.